Chapter 1449. In Yuzhang City, many people had obeyed the command of the swordbearers and entered the gate of the void that Guhan had opened. But due to fear, most of the ordinary people were still hesitant and did not dare to enter the gate of the void. As a result, the whole scene became chaotic, and from time to time, there were even some stampedes. In just a minute, hundreds of people had died because of this chaotic situation. All of this made all the sword-bearers who were responsible for maintaining order feel anxious. But right at this moment, Ying Zheng grew another 2 heads. Strange, if these heads really belong to the 12 Zuwus, then why did Ying Zheng grow a 13th head? Lu Shihua asked in puzzlement when he saw the 2 heads popping out at the same time. I think you've forgotten that Ying Zheng actually has another head, so there's nothing wrong with 13 heads, Guhan said, looking at the 2 heads of Ying Zheng. Of the 2 heads, one immediately fell to the ground, becoming the 12th head to fall to the ground. And there was still another head growing on Ying Zheng's neck. Guhan, save me. This time, Ying Zheng seemed to have recovered from the state of being unable to speak just now. He opened his mouth with difficulty and spoke. At the same time, his expression was full of horror, like a chicken that had fallen into the water. However, Ying Zheng's heart was really big. At this time, he actually had the nerve to ask Ji Yuhan to save him. What the hell is going on? Can you tell me now? Guhan flew in front of Ying Zheng and said to him with a frown. If you promise to save me, I'll tell you everything. Ying Zheng immediately said to Guhan as if he had found a life-saving straw. You're crazy. Even at this time, you still want to make this kind of deal with me? Guhan snorted coldly. Nonsense. If I don't make this deal with you now, my life will be completely gone, Ying Zheng replied with a wry smile. It's up to you whether you want to tell me or not. You can decide for yourself. Guhan flicked his sleeve and said coldly. He had no intention of making a deal with Ying Zheng. I'll tell you. I'll tell you. Ying Zheng felt helpless, because he knew he had lost all his capital now. So, he had no choice but to answer Guhan's questions obediently. Meanwhile, Ying Zheng's current state was revealed by his own words. It turned out that, just as Guhan and Long Shijiendi had speculated, Ying Zheng had not completely digested the power of the 12 Zuwu, or rather, the 12 Zuwu blood pearls were still staying safely in Ying Zheng's body, and had not fused with his own power from the beginning to the end. However, Ying Zheng himself was deceived by the 12 Zuwu blood pearls, because he found that the strength of his fleshly body had grown tremendously, and such a frightening growth had directly numbed the vigilance that Ying Zheng should have, so much so that Ying Zheng took it for granted that the power of the 12 Zuwu blood pearls had been dissolved by him. But, until the appearance of Guhan, everything was still normal. Ying Zheng could still freely use the power of the 12 Zuwu blood pearls, and the 12 Zuwu blood pearls were staying obediently in Ying Zheng's body, showing no signs of disobedience. But, at the moment when Guhan appeared, an unusual change suddenly occurred to the 12 Zuwu blood pearls. Among them, one Zuwu blood pearl, which represented the mysterious underworld, rushed straight into Ying Zheng's brain at the moment when Guhan's sword beam appeared. Because of that, Ying Zheng's body stopped moving instinctively for a moment, and as a result, his head was chopped off by Guhan, while the Zuwu blood pearl, which represented the mysterious underworld, left Ying Zheng's body together with the severed head. The fact that he could regrow his head was something that Ying Zheng had never thought of. After his head was chopped off, Ying Zheng thought he was done for. But to his surprise, he found that his consciousness did not vanish, and still existed in his body. Meanwhile, the Zuwu blood pearl, which represented Emperor Jiang, was slowly growing out from his body, and eventually became Ying Zheng's second head. At first, Ying Zheng was optimistic that he had gained some special ability after devouring the Zuwu blood pearl. But, as more and more heads were chopped off by Guhan, Ying Zheng was horrified to find that the strength of his fleshly body was getting weaker and weaker, and he was gradually losing control over his body. It was to the extent that when the last few heads grew out, Ying Zheng did not even have the ability to speak. It was not until the last head grew out that Ying Zheng regained control over his body. But now, there was not even a single Zuwu blood pearl left in Ying Zheng's body. I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. When the 12 Zuwu blood pearls left, not only did they take away the strength of 12 Zuwus, They even took away my own strength. Now, I have such a huge body, and my true strength may not even be as strong as an ancient sword-bearer. I have nothing left, I'm just an ordinary man now." After finishing his explanation, Ying Zheng added one last sentence. At the same time, he put on a pitiful and miserable look. Even Lu Shihua could not help but feel pity for him when he saw this. That's right, a dignified ancestor of the human race, the famous first emperor, was now left with the strength of an ordinary human. This was indeed pitiful and pitiful. If what you said is true, then the truth is very obvious. After listening to Ying Zheng's narration, Guhan looked at Ying Zheng with pity. You've been deceived from the beginning to the end. You thought that you were the one who schemed and controlled everything behind the scenes. You thought that you had successfully killed the 12 Zuwus with the help of the human race's strength and stole their strength. But in the end, you're the one who was schemed against. Doesn't this sound very stupid? Guhan said mercilessly. You're right. Ying Zheng's face was ferocious at first, but all the ferociousness turned into helplessness in the end. In the end, he had no choice but to admit Guhan's words. The reason why he behaved like this was because Guhan's words had exposed the truth that Ying Zheng did not want to see the most in his heart. You're right. Based on the current situation, I'm indeed a complete fool. I thought I had the power of the 12 Zuwus, but in the end, I'm just a petri dish for the 12 Zuwus. Ying Zheng looked up to the sky and sighed. Master, what do you mean by that? Why don't I understand? Lu Shihua asked in puzzlement. Shihua, even if he borrowed the strength of the entire human race, do you really think that Ying Zheng defeated the 12 Zuwus with his own schemes and strategies? Were the 12 ancestral sorcerers really so weak, and at the same time so stupid that they would allow Ying Zheng to kill them so easily with the strategy of dividing and annihilating them? Do you think that's possible? Guhan sighed and said. Master, you mean, the 12 Zuwus were killed by Ying Zheng on purpose, so that the Zuwu's blood beads in his body could enter Ying Zheng's body, and then be separated from Ying Zheng's body like what happened today? After Lu Shihua said this, even he himself felt a little frightened. If all these were true, then the 12 Zuwu's willingness to pay such a great price to let his Zuwu's blood beads enter someone else's body, what kind of horrible truth could it be that made the 12 Zuwu take such a great risk to achieve his goal? You're right. Guhan seemed to have seen through Lu Shihua's thoughts, and said directly, just like Ying Zheng said, he's just a petri dish. Master, then let's destroy all 12 heads now, and smash the 12 Zuwu's blood beads as well. Maybe we can still make it, Lu Shihua said anxiously. No, it's too late. Guhan shook his head. It was only at this time that Lu Shihua found that the 12 heads were all floating in the air, and with Ying Zheng's body as the center, they began to spin constantly. At the same time, a blood-red force was constantly passing between the 12 heads, and at the same time, a fluctuation that made people feel fear from the bottom of their hearts was being transmitted throughout the whole Yuzhang city. Guhan, save me. Guhan, save me. They're going to eat my body and soul. Guhan, save me. Hurry up and save me. At the same time, Ying Zheng's face changed dramatically again, and he began to cry miserably at Guhan, constantly asking for help from Guhan. Tears even flowed down from his eyes, and he asked for help from Guhan in an extremely sad and tragic tone. It could be seen that Ying Zheng was really scared this time. He was really facing the crisis of death, otherwise he would not have shed tears, nor would he cry for help so miserably. It seems that these 12 Zuwus plan to completely devour Ying Zheng's body, Guhan said with a heavy expression. Then, Master, should we save Ying Zheng now? If Ying Zheng is finally devoured by the 12 Zuwus, will it be another great disaster for us humans? Lu Shihua said worriedly. If I'm not wrong, this is a calamity, but also an opportunity. Let's just watch his last moments. Guhan said coldly, looking at Ying Zheng, whose face was getting more and more frightened and ferocious, desperately trying to resist and escape, but could only struggle helplessly, unable to even move his feet. What other opportunities will there be in this? Although Lu Shihua's heart was full of puzzlement, since this sentence was said by Guhan, it must be right. Since Master had asked him to be a spectator, then he would be a spectator. Guhan, you can't do this. You can't abandon me. Don't you want to know the situation of the black tortoise? Looking at Ji Yuhan's indifferent attitude of watching from the side, at this critical moment of life and death, Ying Zheng had no choice but to take out his final trump card. Chapter 1450. Initially, Ying Zheng thought that when he mentioned the name of Jiyu Xianwu, Guhan's expression would change drastically like before, and at the same time, in order to get the information about Jiyu Xianwu, Guhan would have to make a deal with him. But this time, Ying Zheng was wrong. When Ying Zheng mentioned the name of Jiyu Xianwu, Guhan's expression did fluctuate a little, but he did not say a word. However, he did not reply to Ying Zheng at all. He just kept staring at Ying Zheng indifferently, as if the news Ying Zheng told him was not enough to move Ji Yuhan. Guhan, listen to me. Jiyu Xianwu is facing a very dangerous situation now. She is in a very dangerous situation now. If you don't go and save her immediately, you will regret it for the rest of your life. Feeling that his body was about to face the end, Ying Zheng could only tell more information, hoping that it could make Guhan more anxious and save his own life. Master, Miss Jiyu Xianwu is in danger. Let's save Ying Zheng, why don't Miss Jiyu Xianwu? Lu Shihua also became anxious, and at the same time, he tried to persuade Guhan. No need. To Lu Shihua's surprise, although the muscles on Guhan's face twitched a few times, his expression was still calm. Instead, he calmly said to Lu Shihua, "This is just an exaggeration before he dies. Even if Jiyu Xianwu is not in danger, Ying Zheng will go and save her for me, and he will make up a story of danger. Don't worry about him. Is that so?" Hearing Guhan's words, Lu Shihua's expression became a little complicated. Although what Guhan said made a lot of sense, Lu Shihua still felt that it was not Guhan's sincere words, and the truth was not as simple as what Guhan said. It was just a lie that Ying Zheng made up to save his own life. "I didn't lie to you. I really didn't lie to you. Jiyu Xianwu is really very dangerous. Back then, Jiyu Xianwu, Fleeting Year, and I, Ying Zheng. The three of us roamed the world, saved so many people, and made so many names. There's no one in the world who doesn't know our names. Be it ordinary people or swordsmen, everyone praises our names. Also, when the 300,000 people retreated, the gap was not discovered by the Fleeting Year calendar, but by the Jiyu Black Tortoise. At that time, the hero of humanity was not the Fleeting Year calendar, but the Jiyu Black Tortoise. The Jiyu Black Tortoise was much stronger than the Fleeting Year calendar, and her reputation was also greater than the Fleeting Year calendar. Fleeting Year is only the second one. At the critical moment of life and death, in order to attract Guhan to save him, even though Guhan did not agree to Ying Zheng's condition, Ying Zheng could not wait to tell Guhan about what happened in those years, hoping that he could arouse Guhan's curiosity and get the chance to save his life. But to Ying Zheng's great disappointment, Guhan still did not move even after he had said so many things. But it did not matter. Ying Zheng felt that as long as he said what he was going to say next, Guhan would definitely save him. So, Ying Zheng continued, "Don't you find it strange? Why is it that the Jiyu Black Tortoise was the savior of humanity, but in the end, Kanzu became the Fleeting Year calendar, and the name of the Jiyu Black Tortoise was forever obliterated in the long river of history, and no one even knows this name. Except for people like me who hide underground, the entire human race has completely lost the name of the Jiyu Black Tortoise. Don't you want to know why, Master?" Hearing all this, Lu Shihua immediately turned his head to observe his master's expression, and he found that the flesh on Guhan's face was constantly twitching. From this, Lu Shihua could tell that his master had actually been touched by Ying Zheng's words, but Guhan's desire to kill Ying Zheng was too strong. So, even if he would give up the chance to find out the truth, he still wanted to kill Ying Zheng. "Master, Ying Zheng does not seem to be lying. Why don't we save him? If Master does not want to do it, then I am willing to bear the blame for Master and save Ying Zheng. All the mistakes will be shouldered by your disciple," Lu Shihua said decisively. "No need." Faced with Lu Shihua's willingness, Guhan still replied with these two cold words. At this time, the situation that Ying Zheng was facing was getting worse. The 12 heads were gradually shrinking their encirclement, and they were only less than 500 meters away from Ying Zheng. Judging from the current speed, Ying Zheng would be completely surrounded by the heads in at most 3 minutes. It's because of the Liu Nian clan. It was the Liu Nian clan that suppressed all news, the Liu Nian clan that erased all traces of Jiyu Xianwu's existence, and the Liu Nian clan that has been changing history for 5 consecutive generations. The mastermind behind all this is the Liu Nian clan. Ying Zheng did not dare to continue talking to Guhan, and could only shout the truth at the top of his lungs. All of this was done by the Liu Nian clan. Kanzu and Fleeting Calendar were jealous that Jiyu Xianwu's reputation was greater than his, and that Jiyu Xianwu was the true leader of mankind. So, on the wedding night of Jiyu Xianwu and Fleeting Calendar's wedding, Fleeting Calendar ambushed Jiyu Xianwu when she was defenseless and broke all of her sword maidens. However, Jiyu Xianwu was too strong, so she managed to escape in the end. What I said is the truth. When Jiyu Xianwu was on the run, I was the one who helped her escape. I was also the one who gave her the place of hibernation that I had prepared for myself, Mount Chongyang, so she could hide. By the way, the place where you truly rose to power is Mount Chongyang. Do you think it's such a coincidence? That was decided 1,000 years ago. Ying Zheng said something that shocked Jiyu Han and Lu Shihua to the core. What Ying Zheng said was indeed true. Jiyu Han had really made a name for herself when she was in Chongyang Mountain. But wasn't Yi Qing the one who left Mount Chongyang for Guhan? Since when did it become a place that Jiyu Xianwu left for Guhan? After that, Fleeting Calendar kept sending people to hunt Jiyu Xianwu down. He even chased after Jiyu Xianwu for 10 years. In the end, he found Jiyu Xianwu in Mount Chongyang. If Jiyu Xianwu hadn't given birth to a son for Fleeting Calendar would have let Jiyu Xianwu go after his son begged him. Ying Zheng said hurriedly. At that moment, the encirclement created by the 12 heads was less than 200 meters away. However, Fleeting Year Calendar had no intention of letting Jiyu Xuanwu go. After that shameless bastard settled his son down, he immediately sent people to kill her. It was I who found her again and arranged for her to hide in another dimensional rift in Shanhai Pass. I told her to enter the seamless corridor and use it to hide from Fleeting Year Calendar. Otherwise, she would have died to Fleeting Year Calendar's sword. What? This time, Jiyu Han was truly shaken. If what Ying Zheng said was true, then the Black Tortoise's final path of return was actually to enter the seamless corridor. The Black Tortoise's birth was also within the seamless corridor. But Guhan had been in the seamless corridor for so long, but he had never seen a trace of Jiyu Xianwu. Seeing the shocked expression on Guhan's face, Ying Zheng felt that he had found a weakness in Guhan, so he immediately continued, Fleeting Calendar couldn't find Jiyu Xianwu, so he went back to slander her. Fleeting Calendar even said that Jiyu Xianwu was the cause of the dimensional destruction. He told everyone that it was Jiyu Xianwu's existence that caused the dimensional destruction. So, as long as all traces of Jiyu Xianwu's existence are wiped out, the dimensional destruction will disappear, and humans will return to their normal life. This is the real reason for the great cultural destruction that you speak of. Destroying all knowledge is just a side effect. The real reason is the existence of Jiyu Xianwu. Ying Zheng shouted at the top of his lungs. And Fleeting Calendar didn't go missing. He went into the seamless corridor to hunt down Jiyu Xianwu. He is determined to kill Jiyu Xianwu, so Jiyu Xianwu must still be in great danger. Only you can save her now. Guhan, listen to me. Based on my understanding of Jiyu Xianwu can only be in 2 places. One is the seamless corridor, and the other is Mount Huagua. Since you escaped from the seamless corridor, Jiyu Xianwu must not be in the seamless corridor anymore. And since you can escape, Jiyu Xianwu must be able to escape as well. So, Jiyu Xianwu must be hiding in Mount Huagua, and in the whole world, only I know where Mount Huagua is. If you save me, I will bring you to Mount Huagua, and I will help you save Jiyu Xianwu. Ying Zheng finally revealed his final trump card, and then looked at Guhan with hope. Jiyu Han, as long as you chop off this emperor's head and place it in your dimensional pocket, you can save my life. It's very simple, isn't it? It's very simple for you, right? Save me. I beg you, please save me. Ying Zheng's words sounded a little ridiculous, because at this moment, Ying Zheng was actually begging Guhan to cut off his head. Ying Zheng felt that in order to save Jiyu Xianwu, Guhan would definitely save him. Then, he would have a chance of survival, and he would have the capital to turn the tables in the future. Master. Lu Shihua also looked at Guhan nervously. As long as Guhan gave the order, she would immediately take the risk to cut off Ying Zheng's head. Ying Zheng. Guhan finally spoke. He looked at Ying Zheng deeply, and then said, "Actually, I quite admire you. You relied on your own strength to get to where you are now, step by step. You are different from me, who received help from countless people. You fought alone for 3,000 years. From this point, you are the real hero. I am not as good as you, and I am not as good as you. Guhan, you." Ying Zheng never thought that Guhan would say such words at this time. And Guhan's sudden praise also made Ying Zheng temporarily forget the threat of death, and looked at Guhan blankly. "I can save you, and I can also ignore what you have done to mankind. In fact, you have also contributed to mankind. I have been tied down by things for more than a month. If it weren't for you, I am afraid that Yuzhang City would have been destroyed. But in terms of this, your contribution is greater than a day, and it can completely cover up your selfishness." Ying Zheng was really touched. He really did not expect that Guhan would say such words. He felt a kind of joy from being understood and approved. "But you have lived for so long, don't you feel tired?" Guhan let out a long sigh and said, "You'd better go in peace, and don't make any more trouble. Jiyu Han, I will F*CKU. It was obvious that Ying Zheng, who had been teased by a sudden turn, wanted to curse Jiyu Han. But he no longer had the chance to do so, because all the heads that had fallen off earlier had already attached themselves to Ying Zheng's body. Then, these heads directly fused with Ying Zheng's body. At this moment, Ying Zheng was a monster with heads all over his body. And at the moment when these heads merged with Ying Zheng's body, Ying Zheng's eyes, which had been wide open all the time, suddenly disappeared without a trace. This time, Ying Zheng was really dead. Chapter 1451. Did Ying Zheng really die just like that? Lu Shihua couldn't help but lament as he watched the murderer who had been his enemy for a long time and almost killed him lose all signs of life just like that. Dead. He's dead. If the 12 Zhu Wu really wanted to resurrect, he would never let the 13 Zhu Wu go. Guhan's expression was a little complicated. "Actually, I didn't kill him from the beginning to the end. It was his own greed that killed him. I have to say, this is really a little ridiculous. But Master, Ying Zheng is dead. Then, won't you never find Miss Black Tortoise's secret and the location of Mount Huagua Mountain?" Lu Shihua said with some worry. "Don't worry. Even if I don't find it in Mount Huagua Mountain, it will jump out by itself sooner or later," Guhan said faintly. Hearing Guhan's words, Lu Shihua also seemed to understand something. He asked curiously, "Master, did you already know about this?" "I guessed most of it." Guhan sighed, then decisively changed the topic. "Let's not talk about this first. When the 12 Zhu Wu's brains completely absorb Ying Zheng, I'm afraid that the 12 Zhu Wu's will really resurrect. There are still too many humans who have not entered the Void Gate. This is the real problem we need to worry about. But Master, why don't we kill the 12 Zhu Wu's directly before they resurrect? Why do we have to wait until they resurrect?" Lu Shihua asked puzzledly. "Didn't Master tell you that the 12 Zhu Wu's also have something that Master wants? So, the 12 Zhu Wu's must be resurrected, and then Master will personally kill them. Only then can Master get what Master want." Guhan said straightforwardly. "Yes, Master, I understand. Disciple will listen to Master's word." Lu Shihua nodded vigorously. "Very good. Master has an important thing for you to do now," Guhan said with a smile. "Master, please give the order. I promise to complete the task." Lu Shihua replied immediately. "I don't need you to complete the mission. I just want to see what you've achieved in the past 10 years, Guhan said with a smile. "Your Majesty Long Sure, this won't do. The crowd is too chaotic. Many people keep clamoring, saying that this is a trap set by Ying Zheng, who wants to trap them in a dark prison forever. Therefore, many people are unwilling to enter the Void Gate. People are being trampled to death every moment. Your Majesty, what do you think we should do? Long Jendi had a bitter look on his face as he listened to the reports of the other swordbearers. Although the swordbearers had been working very hard to send hundreds of millions of people into the Void Gate, however, the reality was that most people did not believe the words of these swordbearers. They refused to enter the Void Gate no matter what. Damn it! This is all the doing of that bastard Ying Jing, the retribution that he sowed. He has caused all the swordbearers to lose more than half of their prestige. Another swordbearer next to him gnashed his teeth and said, Ying Zheng's perverse behavior in the past 12 days had completely made all the ordinary people see the true face of Ying Zheng. But at the same time, those swordbearers who followed Ying Zheng and did not dare to resist had also completely lost their former prestige. If it was in the past, as long as these swordbearers said a word, most ordinary people would instinctively believe the words of the swordbearers and would be willing to jump into a mountain of knives and a sea of fire. But now, these swordbearers were trying their best to persuade them, but most ordinary people remained unmoved. They felt that these swordbearers had become Ying Zheng's accomplices. Fine. This old man will personally persuade them. Long Jendi gritted his teeth and said after hearing the report of his subordinates. Then, he took out a set of instruments from his dimensional pocket. After operating it for a while, under the projection of this instrument, a huge figure larger than Ying Zheng appeared in Yuzhang City. Of course, unlike Ying Zheng's real body, the figure of Long Jendi that appeared this time was just a very obvious virtual image. It was an image that was enlarged with the help of a three-dimensional projection equipment. Although this image looked a little fuzzy, it was enough for all the ordinary people to see clearly that the one who appeared at this time was none other than Long Jendi. At the same time, Long Jendi's voice also resounded throughout Yuzhang City. Dear compatriots, we did not deceive you. Ying Zheng did not really kill the 12 Zuwu, and now Ying Zheng has been devoured by the 12 Zuwu, and the 12 Zuwu is about to be reborn. But now that Yuzhang City has lost the protection of the super-dimensional wall system, everyone can only wait for death in Yuzhang City. We have now opened the super-large Void Gate. Please, for the sake of this Long Jendi's old face, please enter the Void Gate immediately. This is really for the sake of everyone. Long Jendi's persuasion was very earnest and well-intentioned, and coupled with his old face, it really had a certain effect. After listening to his words, many people hesitantly entered the Void Gate. But in fact, not many people were persuaded. More people still stood motionless outside the Void Gate, still refusing to enter the Void Gate. At the same time, such a dialogue was constantly circulating among the crowd. Hey! Don't believe the words of the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor. Have you forgotten that he was the one who promised us that Ying Zheng would be a good leader? He was also the one who promised us that Ying Zheng would be able to save us. If it wasn't for him, how could we have allowed an unknown human to be our leader? That's right, this Long Jendi and Ying Zheng must be in cahoots. Otherwise, when Ying Zheng announced that he wanted to become the emperor, completely gave up the super-dimensional wall system, announced that he wanted to choose 3,000 women from our daughters and girlfriends, and even wanted to castrate some of our children and make them eunuchs, why didn't Long Jendi come out to stop him? I heard that the appearance of Sword Immortal Hong Jun, the resurrection of Shihua Jendi, and the death of Ying Zheng are all hoaxes. Do you see the Ying Zheng whose body is now covered with skulls? I heard that Ying Zheng is now practicing a peerless evil technique. Once he masters it, his strength will increase by 100 times, but at the cost of the lives of 400 million people. Therefore, once we enter the Void Gate, we will become Ying Zheng's cultivation furnace, and will die in vain. Everyone, please don't be fooled. As the saying goes, 3 people make a tiger. At that time, when several people were constantly telling such words in one's ear, even a rational person would not be able to help but believe these so-called truths. Therefore, they still stood trembling outside the Void Gate, and no matter what they did, they refused to enter the Void Gate. These fools. When Long Jendi saw this scene, his whole body trembled with anger, and his old body seemed even more aged. Perhaps Long Jendi would die of anger here. Senior, let me do it. At this time, a gentle voice sounded in Long Jendi's ear. Everyone, listen up. Don't believe Long Jendi's words. He is going to deceive us to die. Just as the crowd was constantly consolidating such thoughts, they suddenly found that next to the huge phantom of Long Shijendi, a new phantom suddenly appeared. It's Sword Immortal Shihua. Oh my god! It's really Sword Immortal Shihua. When this figure appeared, everyone was shocked. They looked at the sky incredulously, rubbing their eyes as if they had seen a ghost. Hello, everyone. I haven't seen you for 4 years. I don't know if you still remember me, Lu Shihua said with a smile on his face, and this smile was really familiar to everyone. In the 16 years from 4 to 20 years ago, almost everyone had grown up looking at this smiling face. As a chairman of the Sword Committee for 16 years, Lu Shihua had long been deeply immersed in everyone's consciousness. Even when Yingzheng's authority was at its peak, when someone mentioned the chairman of the Sword Committee, most people would instinctively think of Lu Shihua's face. Chairman Shihua. Great, you're really not dead. That's really great. That's really great. Someone said, then directly knelt down and began to cry. And this cry quickly infected many people around. Almost a quarter of the human beings, after seeing Lu Shihua appear, could not help but burst into tears. Because in the 16 years when Lu Shihua was in power, it was almost the best 16 years that human beings had lived. Probably because he had suffered a lot when he was an ordinary person, Lu Shihua had announced a lot of policies that were full of kindness to ordinary people in the past 16 years, so that the status of ordinary people in the city had been greatly improved, the allocation of resources had also been more, and their lives had been better. Therefore, almost all ordinary people were grateful to Lu Shihua. It was precisely because of this that when Lu Shihua appeared, a quarter of the human beings burst into tears, because they really missed the good life in Lu Shihua's era. Dear compatriots, I can assure you that Long Shijendi did not deceive you. If possible, I will certainly explain everything in detail to you. But now we don't have time. The 12 Zhu Wu may resurrect at any time. If you are still in Yuzhang City, you can only wait for death. Please rest assured, these void doors were opened by my master. They are directly connected to the void, and are one of the safest places in the world. Everyone, please, for the sake of my name, Lu Shihua, please enter the gate of the void. I beg of everyone. After Lu Shihua finished speaking, the huge figure directly bowed deeply to everyone. Because this figure was directly enlarged and projected on the human body, at this time Lu Shihua must have also deeply bowed to everyone. Damn, Yingzheng is not worthy of trust, but is Chairman Shihua also not worthy of trust? I believe that Chairman Shihua will never harm me. No, even if I am killed by Chairman Shihua, I will still be happy. I will go in now. Immediately, someone shouted, and then directly stepped into the void door. And this person's action was only a signal. With Lu Shihua's bow, the crowd that had been in a stalemate finally began to surge like a tide, and a large number of people directly marched into the void door. And under the pressure of so many people, even those who were still full of doubts at this time had no choice but to follow the crowd into the void door. Good. It seems that my disciple has really done a good job in the past 20 years. My decision that year was not wrong. Seeing such a turbulent crowd, Guhan could not help but praise. Even Guhan should not underestimate Lu Shihua's influence among humans. Not to mention others, in this point, even Guhan and Lu Shihua were too far apart. Chapter 1452. Sister. I was wrong. Please forgive me. At this time, there was a person who seemed to have been completely forgotten by everyone. This person was Lu Shihua's good brother, Lu Yin. At this time, Lu Yin was still kneeling in his previous position, not moving at all. Get up. A familiar voice sounded in Lu Yin's ear. Why are you kneeling here? Get up. Master. Lu Yin raised his head in surprise and looked at Jiyu Han, who was standing in front of him. Then, he began to crazily kowtow. His head banged on the ground, and it sounded like he was smashing nails. As he kowtowed, he begged, Master, I know I was wrong, I really know I was wrong. Please, please, I beg you to tell sister, ask her to forgive me. This shouldn't be said by me, nor should it be up to me to decide. Guhan placed his hand on Lu Yin's head, and gently stroked Lu Yin's hair. This was a relatively intimate action, and at the same time, it was also a way to make people feel comfortable and comfortable. However, when Guhan's hand stroked Lu Yin's hair, Lu Yin felt a sharp, ice-cold aura constantly rushing from his scalp to his body. It felt like Guhan's hand was going to crush his head at any time. No, master won't kill me. Lu Yin tried hard to restrain his desire to escape, and at the same time, he persuaded himself. Oh, by the way, don't call me master. Guhan said immediately. Master. When Lu Yin heard Guhan say this, he immediately became anxious and wanted to explain, but Guhan didn't give him a chance to continue, and said indifferently, "It's not because of what you did that I don't want you as my disciple, it's because you were never my disciple from the beginning to the end. Because I didn't teach you anything from beginning to end, and I didn't teach you all your skills. My only disciple was your sister. I hope you can understand this. But master, of course, if it wasn't for that bottle of sovereign blood, how could I have my current strength? It was you who opened up my future and my life. Master, you are my master." Lu Yin desperately kowtowed as he replied. "Are you trying to tell me that the reason you became like this because of your pursuit of power is because of me? That I shouldn't have opened the door to your pursuit of power?" Guhan said coldly. "Disciple doesn't dare. Disciple doesn't mean that." Lu Yin immediately panicked when he heard this and hurriedly said, "Sai, do you still remember the first time we met? That time was so nostalgic." Guhan sighed and said faintly, "Back then, I was seriously injured and couldn't even move my body. It was you who dug me out from the ruins and let me live in your shabby home. Who asked you to be so stingy with food? After you took care of me for a month, I was finally able to recover. Be it you or your sister, you are actually my benefactors. If it wasn't for you two, I'm afraid I would have died. Actually, now that I think about it, perhaps the time I spent lying in your home was the most peaceful and happy period of my life. At that time, I didn't have to think too much, and I didn't have to watch the backs of you and your sister busy themselves in front of me. I could spend a day leisurely. Now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever had such a beautiful and leisurely time again." "Master, you're exaggerating. This is what we should do." Lu Yin was also affected by Guhan's words. He forgot about the bone-chilling cold on his head and said with tears flowing down his face. Of course, Lu Yin also vaguely felt that something was wrong, but in this panic, he couldn't figure out what was wrong. "Master, Disciple didn't think that things would actually turn out like this. If it was possible, Disciple really hoped that you were just an ordinary person at that time. Me, my sister, and you could live in that small slum for the rest of our lives. Perhaps in that case, Disciple wouldn't have taken such a wrong step." Lu Yin said chokingly. "It's too late. It's all too late." Guhan sighed. His hands that were originally constantly stroking Lu Yin's head suddenly turned into a pair of sharp claws, firmly grasping Lu Yin's head. "It's too late, you can't go back. You're no longer that innocent and cute child. Since you can make the decision to harm your sister, you should be able to think of today's ending. This matter shouldn't have been decided by me, nor should it have been done by me. This should have been your sister's responsibility. But I know your sister too well. Your sister still loves you from the bottom of her heart. You're still her closest brother, so there's no way she would kill you. But in the cycle of reincarnation, good and evil will be rewarded. Your actions have determined that you must receive the punishment you deserve. Since your sister can't bear to kill you, and since you keep saying that I'm your master, then let me, your master, clean up the house and get rid of you." "Lu Yin, are you ready?" "Yes. Disciple understands. Disciple deserves to die. Disciple, accept your death." Lu Yin closed his eyes and completely gave up on resisting. He also gave up on arguing and calmly prepared to accept death. "No. Master, don't. Master, don't." At this moment, Lu Shihua, who had finished persuading Lu Yin, thought of his brother and his master. Lu Shihua, who had already understood something, immediately flew through the void gate and returned to Guhan's side. Lu Shihua instinctively wanted to push her master away and save her brother. But just as her hands were about to touch Guhan, she retracted them and knelt in front of Guhan with a plop. Tears streamed down her face as she cried, "Master, I'm begging you. This disciple only has one family left. Please spare Lu Yin's life. I believe that Lu Yin will definitely turn over a new leaf. Seeing his disciple, who had sacrificed so much for him, kneeling in front of him and begging him not to kill her only brother, even Guhan couldn't help but feel a little soft-hearted. If it was a normal male lead, he might have let out a long sigh and let this fellow live under his disciple's pleas. At most, he would cripple Lu Yin's entire life and make him a normal person. But Guhan wasn't a normal male lead. The word decisive had never disappeared from Guhan's name. Disciple, do you know what master regrets the most? Guhan looked at Lu Shihua and asked. I don't know. Lu Shihua shook her head. Right now, her mind was in a mess. How could she know what she regretted the most in her life? What master regrets the most is that I didn't kill Ying Zheng in Shanghai Pass. Instead, I made some bullsh** tea deal with him, which caused 200 million people to die in this catastrophe. Disciple, each of these 200 million people has their parents, their wives, and their children. They could have been leisurely lying in their bedroom, watching TV, accompanying their lovely children and kind parents, living a life that may not have been happy, but it was a natural thing to do. But because of Master's mistake, these 200 million people died. There are also tens of thousands of sword-bearers, as well as those famous sword-bearers who have made great contributions to humanity in Shanghai Pass. They're all dead. So, disciple, Master won't make such a mistake again. Since you've made a mistake, you have to accept the punishment you deserve. Otherwise, how can those who didn't make a mistake but suffered pain and torture be innocent? As soon as Guhan finished speaking, the thousands of sword qis in his hand pierced into Lu Yin's body. Lu Yin let out a cold snort. On the surface, there seemed to be no change, but just like Ying Zheng, he instantly lost all signs of life. As Guhan loosened his grip, Lu Yin collapsed to the ground powerlessly, turning into a stiff corpse. At this moment, Lu Yin's bones were still intact, but all of his internal organs had already been ground into a pile of meat paste by the cold sword qi. Moreover, Lu Yin's head had been completely minced by Guhan. At the same time, because of his understanding of consciousness fragments, Lu Yin had no way of surviving through soul fragments. It could be said that Lu Yin was completely dead. Brother! My brother! Lu Shihua wailed, his voice rising from the ground to the clouds. It was as if the whole world was ringing with Lu Shihua's cries. And at this moment, the crowd that was rushing into the void gate froze at the same time. Every one of them heard Lu Shihua's cries. His cries sounded like they came from the abyss, and it stirred their souls. At this moment, all humans were grieving for Lu Shihua's sorrow. What you're doing is really too cruel. Don't you think about Shihua's feelings at all? At the same time, another weak voice pierced through the void and rang in Guhan's ear. Since my disciple can't make the right decision, I, as his master, can only do it on his behalf. I will never make the same mistake I made with Ying Zheng. Ji Yuhan's hand instantly reached into the void, and then with a forceful pull, a pale body was pulled into his embrace. No. The old voice cried out, but how could she stop the young and strong Guhan, so she was still pulled into Guhan's arms. You finally appeared. I thought you wouldn't appear, Guhan said softly as he stroked the familiar but old face in front of him. No. Don't look at me. Please don't look at me. Liu Yanling's voice was on the verge of crying. She really did not want Guhan to see her like this. Lu Shihua was now clearly an old woman. Her skin was old, shriveled, and there was not a single trace of blood on her body. Her face was full of wrinkles, and all her hair was silver white. She was so thin that only her skin wrapped around her bones. At the same time, her body exuded the unique smell of death of an old person. Now that Liu Yanling was in Guhan's arms, she looked like an 80-year-old woman being hugged by a 20-year-old boy. It was an extremely disharmonious and mismatched scene. Liu Yanling was afraid of such a scene. This was also the reason why she had not dared to show her face in front of Guhan even though she had already known about Guhan's return. She had been hiding in the void, watching everything silently. It was only when Guhan had killed Lu Yin that Liu Yanling could not help but say that out of sorrow in her heart. Only then did Guhan grab her into his arms. I don't want to say anything. Even if you've become this old, I'll still like your nonsense. Guhan caressed and felt Liu Yanling's moist and loyal skin as he said, Just you watch, after we kill the 12 Zuwu, I'll return your youth to you. In a small plot of land, one person was hugging a corpse and wailing bitterly, while the other was hugging an old woman and making promises that sounded like a fantasy. Chapter 1453. Don't brag about me now. Fleeting time pushed Ji Yuhan away and looked worriedly at Lucy Hua, who was still bawling his eyes out. I really don't know where you got your heart from. How could you kill the brother of your disciple who loved you so much? Aren't you afraid that your disciple's entire generation will hate you for it? Yes. I'm more afraid than anyone else. Guhan nodded. Looking at Lu Shihua's back, he suddenly seemed to have aged a little. But I have to do it. I really can't make the same mistake again. Then you'd better talk to your disciple. Otherwise, the more time passes, the deeper the knot in her heart will become. I'm really afraid that the two of you will become enemies because of this. Liuyan Ling said. Yes. It's time to talk to Shihua. Guhan nodded and walked behind Lu Shihua. After hesitating for a long time, he said faintly, Shihua, will you hate Master? Master, you don't have to say anything else. Shihua understands your reasoning. Lu Yin deserves to die, and your disciple will never hate you, Master. But Master, can you let your disciple cry in peace for a while, then hug Lu Yin? Although Shihua's voice was calm, it contained a heart-wrenching pain. Master understands. Guhan nodded. He looked around Yuzhang City and found that the crowd had almost dispersed. There were still some people who did not believe in Ying Zheng's evil plan, or who still thought that it was a conspiracy, and were hiding in some corners of the city, unwilling to enter the Void Gate. There were quite a number of such people, about 1 million in total. Then, Ji Yuhan looked at Ying Zheng's corpse, which was completely surrounded by 12 heads. At this moment, Ying Zheng's corpse no longer looked like a human anymore. It had completely turned into a huge lump of meat, and around this lump of meat were 12 different heads. On top of that, a powerful aura began to surround the entire corpse. Feeling this aura, Guhan understood that there was not much time left for humans. The 12 Zuwu was about to be resurrected. Guhan, there's still some time. Why don't I clear the area again and force these people into the Void Gate? Liuyan Ling walked over. As the only descendant of the Liuyan family, she could also feel the aura of the 12 Zuwu's resurrection. She also discovered that there were still many humans hiding in the city, so she took the initiative to speak up. Forget it. These people chose their own path. Since they chose the path of death, then it's their fate. Let's not waste any more time on them, Guhan said calmly. At the same time, he decided the fate of these poor self-righteous humans. Understood. Liuyan Ling nodded. If it was Liuyan Ling who had just made her debut, she might have pleaded for these doomed humans. However, Liuyan Ling had seen hundreds of millions of people die. The number of millions was just a string of numbers in Liuyan Ling's heart. They had already done their duty. As for these people who were courting death, they could only leave them be. Ling, the most important thing now is to send those sword-bearers who are still scattered everywhere into the Void Gate. There must be some sword-bearers who are as stupid as these humans and are hiding somewhere in the city. In that case, I'll have to trouble you and the other immortal sword-wielders to chase them into the Void Gate one by one, Ji Yuhan said. Got it. Liuyan Ling nodded again. At this time, the difference between ordinary people and sword-bearers was once again reflected. If ordinary people were stupid, they could only die. However, if the sword-bearers were stupid, there were people who were willing to save their lives. That's right, you must ensure your own safety. If you really can't save the sword-bearers, don't bother about them. If you are in danger, just enter the Void Gate directly. There must be no hesitation. I can already feel that when the 12 Grand Wizards are resurrected, they will be even more powerful than before. You might be able to keep your life, but the rest of the immortal sword-level sword-bearers won't be able to last more than a few seconds. I know all this. Liuyan Ling seemed to be a little impatient. She stared deeply at Guhan and said, What about you? Are you going to stay here alone and face the 12 Zuwu who are even more terrifying? Of course, as I said, I have something I must obtain from the 12 Zuwu, so I must kill them with my own hands. This is my destiny, and it is something I must do, Guhan said with a smile. Then what about your safety? Liuyan Ling was still full of worry. Don't you understand me? I am actually the most afraid of death in this world. If all of you die, I will definitely still be alive. Guhan laughed. Liuyan Ling also knew that she could not convince Guhan no matter what. She brought the sword bearers who were in hiding and began to send the sword bearers into the void one by one. Shihua, you go into the void too, Guhan said to the still crying Lu Shihua after sending Liuyan Ling away. Master, Shihua doesn't want to go in. Lu Shihua shook his head, still full of sorrow. Shihua's heart is full of hatred now. Shihua doesn't want to vent it on Master, so Shihua can only vent it on the 12 Zhu Wu. Master, if you don't let Shihua vent it out, Shihua will go crazy. That's good. With the 12-winged angel sword, your safety is even higher than Master's. If you don't want to go into the void, then don't. Guhan sighed, then waved his hand, and Lu Yin's body disappeared. Master. Seeing Lu Yin's body disappear, Lu Shihua immediately panicked, looking at Guhan with fear in his eyes. Was it not enough for his master to kill his brother, so he had to destroy his brother's body? Don't get the wrong idea, I am not that cruel. Guhan sighed, then patted Lu Shihua's head. Don't worry, Master is only keeping Lu Yin's body in his dimensional pocket. Believe Master, Master is doing this for your own good. If this body is kept by your side, sooner or later you will be driven crazy by this body, and then one day you might want to kill Master. So it's better to keep this body for Master. If you want to see it, Master will let you see it at any time. This is the best outcome for you. Master. You bastard. Lu Shihua cried, crying even more sadly. At the same time, he also cursed at Guhan, but he did not ask Guhan for Lu Yin's body. Lu Shihua knew in his heart that this was indeed the best outcome and choice for him. Soon, under Guhan's arrangements, the originally bustling and lively Yuzhang city instantly became extremely quiet. Only the horrifying mass of meat was still constantly changing, and two figures were floating directly above it, watching the changes with expressionless faces. Finally, when the lump of flesh expanded to its maximum size, the 12 ancestral sorcerers' heads opened their eyes in an instant. Then, they began to protrude outwards at the same time. As the 12 heads grew, necks, shoulders, chests, abdomens, buttocks, legs. 12 complete human bodies gradually grew out of the lump of flesh. The lump of flesh itself became smaller and smaller, and as the 12 bodies grew, the lump of flesh disappeared. At the same time, this also meant that the last trace of Ying Zheng's existence in this world was gone. Is this the 12 Zhu Wu? Guhan looked at the 12 newly born bodies and said with some admiration and curiosity. In fact, this was the first time Guhan really saw the 12 Zhu Wu's appearance. After all, when the 12 Zhu Wus were wreaking havoc in the human world, Guhan was still in the seamless corridor. I've been resurrected. Ancestral Magus Emperor Jiang, who had been resurrected, suddenly spoke. Lu Shihua, who was standing aside, frowned. How is it? Guhan looked at Lu Shihua and asked. This doesn't seem to be Dijiang's voice. Lu Shihua said doubtfully, Dijiang's voice sounds like the voice of a huge strange bird. Even though it's human language, it's filled with a kind of sharp birdsong. But now Dijiang's voice has completely become human, and there's no sense of sharpness. There's nothing strange about that. After all, they've been reborn. Guhan said indifferently. I've been resurrected too. I've been resurrected too. The 12 ancestors of sorcerers said the same thing with their eyes closed one after another. Everyone found it strange. Was it necessary to repeat the same thing to each of them? It felt like a repeater. It seems that our plan has worked. Dijiang said again, with the help of the 13th Zhu Wu's body, we've finally completed the assimilation and rebirth. That's right, I've already felt the original power of this world. We're no longer rejected by this world, and we've become the real Zhu Wu. Zhu Wu Hutu said. So the reason why you guys want to be reborn with Ying Zheng's body is to assimilate with this world. Guhan said after hearing the conversation between the Zhu Wus. Master, what do you mean? Lu Shihua asked in confusion. It's very simple. The 12 Zhu Wus are Yuan Kus after all. They can use their own power, but they're rejected by our world. As the embodiment of Pan-Gu's body, if the 12 Zu-Wus are rejected by the world, they're destined not to be able to exert their real power. So if they want to regain their original power, they have to become the people of this world, or in other words, the native Zu-Wus of this world. Guhan said. So they used Ying Zheng's body, because Ying Zheng is an ancestral wizard born and bred in this world. Lu Shihua finally understood what Ying Zheng was trying to tell him. If this was the truth, the seemingly reckless 12 Zu-Wus with a head full of muscles and no intelligence had ruthlessly schemed against the cunning Ying Zheng. With today's good show, Ying Zheng took the initiative to eat the Zu-Wu's blood beads, which had been reborn, and then the 12 Zu-Wus could be reborn with Ying Zheng's body. My disciple, get ready for battle. It's going to be a very difficult battle. Guhan smiled and drew out the heavenly sword from his waist. Chapter 1454. That's weird. Why is Master using the heavenly sword? Why isn't Master using his emperor sword? Lu Shihua thought to himself in confusion when he saw that Guhan was holding the heavenly sword in his hand. However, since Guhan was doing this, he must have had his reasons. Therefore, Lu Shihua didn't say anything. Instead, he gripped the seraph sword in his hand tightly. Human, are you going to fight us? As if sensing the murderous intent in Guhan's hand, a Zu-Wu's sharp eyes instantly looked at Guhan in the sky. At the same time, Guhan recognized that this Zu-Wu was Zu-Wu Gomang. That's funny. You make it sound like you're not going to fight me. Lu Shihua wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes and said, let's fight to the death today. Why should I fight? Ancestral wizard Emperor Jiang's words stunned Lu Shihua. Wasn't the battle between him and the 12 ancestral wizards a matter of course? You're Yuan Ku, and we're humans. Of course we have to fight. Do you need to ask for a reason? Lu Shihua said through gritted teeth. That reason doesn't hold water. Jiang's huge head stared at Lu Shihua and said something that made Lu Shihua even more confused. We're no longer Yuan Ku. We're free from the shackles of filth. We're the original Zu-Wu of this world. I don't want to kill you humans. Why should we fight? Lu Shihua was stunned for a while before saying, then don't you want to kill us humans? No. Jiang shook his head. There's reincarnation in the heavenly Tao. We're no longer the main characters of this world. The main characters of this world are you humans. We, the Wu people, don't have to go against the main characters of this world. Lu Shihua was stunned again. Then don't you want to destroy our city? Is the city you're talking about the thing under our feet? Jiang looked around, then shook his head. If you don't want us to destroy this place, we can just fly out of this city. I promise we won't hurt your city. Lu Shihua was even more confused. She didn't ask anything else, but Jiang continued, we have no interest in fighting for living space with you humans. This world belongs to you humans. We, the Wu people, only hope to obtain the piece of land within the Shanhai Pass that you mentioned, so that we, the Wu people, can flourish. From now on, the human race and the Wu people will never be allowed to enter each other's territory. Everyone will live in peace on their own land. This is the attitude of the Wu people. Master. Lu Shihua tugged at Guhan's sleeve subconsciously. Clearly, Lu Shihua didn't know what to say anymore. According to the 12 Zu-Wu, they, who had taken the initiative to get rid of the filthy control, now wanted to live a quiet and peaceful life without aggression with humans. Therefore, they really didn't invade each other, and humans didn't need to be wary of the Wu people anymore. This was fundamentally different from what Lu Shihua had imagined. Lu Shihua had always thought that they would have an earth-shattering battle with the 12 Zu-Wu, so she had never thought that this would happen. If this was the case, then wouldn't it be a stupid waste of time for over 400 million people to hide in the void? Those who hid in Yuzhang City and didn't want to enter the void were the real smart ones. If this was the case, it was too funny. Lu Shihua didn't think this was a normal plot development from the bottom of her heart. But on second thought, this seemed to be the real normal plot development. Since the Wu people had been freed from the filthy control, they had lost the reason to fight with humans. If this was the case, why would the Wu people fight to the death with humans? The Wu people could completely become transcendent existences like the free cities. They just needed to live their own lives. This was the real normal plot development. Master, why don't we send the 12 Zhu Wu off? Lu Shihua looked at Jiyu Han and said with some hesitation. If they could truly maintain peace, that would be the best thing. Of course, Lu Shihua hoped to see an ending where there was no need to fight anymore. Of course, not having to fight is of course a good thing. There's no reason to refuse, is there? Gu Han smiled and seemed to have agreed to the peace invitation of the 12 Zhu Wu. What? The Wu people actually want to live in peace with us. They have been freed from the filthy control. This is great. That's great. The conversation between Lu Shihua and the 12 Grand Wizards was not only heard by the people present. In fact, the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor was using his ability to broadcast the scene outside the void into the void in real time. It felt as if he was watching the scene outside the window through a glass window. This scene and conversation were not only heard by the swordbearers, but also by all the humans who were shivering in the void who were hiding in the void. But the swordbearers and ordinary humans had two completely different attitudes. The swordbearers began to cheer loudly. When they saw the 12 Zhu Wu completely resurrected through the void, their hearts were filled with fear. If the death of the 12 Zhu Wu was really just the 12 Zhu Wu throwing away their lives, didn't that mean that they had never really defeated the 12 Zhu Wu from beginning to end? But now that the 12 Zhu Wu had been resurrected, their strength must have increased. Otherwise, there would be no need for them to resurrect like this. At this time, the 12 Zhu Wu was probably no longer an existence that humans could defeat. Even if all the human swordbearers rushed forward at this time and fought, in the end, there would only be a dead end. Such fear had been deeply engraved in the bones of the swordbearers. Therefore, when they heard that the 12 ancestral sorcerer had taken the initiative to ask for peace, the swordbearers started cheering. Of course, they did not want to fight, as fighting would mean death. It was a wonderful thing to give the 12 ancestral sorcerers territory in exchange for peace between humans and the ancestral sorcerer, so almost all the swordbearers nodded in agreement, even Longsha Jendi was no exception. They really didn't want to fight anymore. On the other hand, the ordinary people fell silent. It wasn't that they didn't want peace, but they were reminded of their loved ones who had died in the hands of the ancestor of witchcraft. If humans were to live in peace with their tribe, wouldn't it mean that their loved ones and their cities had died in vain? But these people couldn't say anything. They didn't even dare to say a word of objection, because they were all ordinary people. Even if they wanted to take revenge, they didn't have the strength to do so. Doing so would only lead to more human deaths. So even if their hatred for the 12 Zhu Wu was burning to the extreme, they didn't dare to really express their thoughts. In this way, silence became the best way. Therefore, at this time, humans almost reached a consensus at the same time, and that was peace. No matter if it was peace they hoped for or not, and no matter if this peace was stained with human blood, peace was always a good thing, wasn't it? So at this time, everyone looked at Lu Shihua and Gu Han expectantly, hoping that they would immediately agree to the 12 Zhu Wu's request, and that the humans and the Zhu Wus would maintain peace forever. It seemed that Gu Han and Lu Shihua were ready to agree to the 12 Zhu Wu's request. But the next second, Gu Han's voice became bone-chilling. But have you asked the other 200 million humans for their opinion? What do you mean, humans? Di Jiang asked in confusion. Actually, I don't know the specific number, but the number of 200 million shouldn't be too little, not too much. Ji Yuhan sighed. A total of 200 million people. 200 million people have died in your attacks over the past 4 years. What I mean is that my agreement isn't important. What's important is to get the agreement of these 200 million people. If they are willing to keep peace with you, then I have no objection. They're already dead. How can we ask for their opinion? Xian Ming continued. Plus, it's only 200 million people. Compared to your human race's reproduction rate of locusts, these 200 million people can be completely replenished in 70 to 80 years. You can reproduce slowly. Why do you have to pester us endlessly here? So the lives of 200 million people are just pestering in your eyes. Gu Han smiled indifferently. So, It seems that you don't intend to take responsibility for the 7 cities we humans lost. Why do you have so much nonsense? If you want to start a war, I, Zhurong, will accompany you anytime. Zhurong, with his fiery red skin, said energetically. Good. Then let's fight. Use your lives to atone for our 200 million dead souls. Ji Yuhan said straightforwardly. The situation that could have been heading towards peace seemed to have been completely destroyed at this moment. What is Hongjun Jendi doing? Could it be that he still wants to continue fighting? Hearing Guhan's words, some swordbearers in the void didn't understand. They were even a little angry. Peace had come. Did Guhan want to keep fighting? Hongjun Jendi isn't qualified to represent us. We must have peace. Let Hongjun Jendi come back. Let Shihua Jendi negotiate with the Wu people. Another swordbearer said loudly. Many people agreed with him. But Hongjun Jendi is right. Are our 200 million people going to die in vain? Of course, there were still some dissenting voices amidst the crowds growing agitated. However, his voice was too soft and weak, and it was quickly drowned out. Your Majesty Longsha Jendi, we have to go out. We have to make Hongjun Jendi take back what he said. He isn't qualified to represent us. Some sword-bearers said loudly. Then, a few immortal-level sword-bearers prepared to open the void and leave. However, after waiting for 3 or 4 minutes, there was still no change in the void, and no exit was opened. What's wrong? Hurry up and open the exit. Do you want Hongjun Jendi to destroy our peace? Some sword-bearers urged anxiously. It's not that I don't want to open it, but the void can't be opened. What's going on? Why can't the void be opened? This is impossible. I open the void every day. These immortal-level sword-bearers were also very anxious. However, no matter how hard they tried, the door of the void could no longer be opened. Give up. Without Guhan's consent, I'm afraid the door of the void can't be opened. Liuyan Ling, who had been silent all this while, suddenly said calmly. When he was still a spiritual sword level, he had already mastered the rules of the void. Now that he has become an emperor sword-bearer, the void is like a toy in his hands. Without his consent, no one can leave, not even me. Chapter 1455. Since this human doesn't know what's good for him and wants to fight us, then why are we still talking nonsense? Kill him, then kill all the other humans. This world will belong to us, the sorcerer tribe. Damn the main character of the world, aren't we, the sorcerer tribe, back now? Zhurong became extremely impatient after hearing the conversation between Guhan and Dejiang. The moment the negotiation broke down, endless flames swept towards Guhan. This was Zhurong's true samadhi fire. Back then, a small true samadhi fire that was only the size of a lotus flower had already burned the powerful Sun Wukong to the point that he had to flee to the heavenly court for help. This time, Zhurong directly spat out the true samadhi fire that was as huge as a building, which immediately engulfed Sun Wukong's body. It's over. The war still started. Seeing that the war had finally started, a swordsman collapsed in the void powerlessly. His face was as pale as a funeral procession. Hongjun Jendi is a lunatic. Does he want to destroy us humans completely? Another sword-bearer wailed. Many other sword-bearers followed suit and wailed as well. You bastards. Liuyan Ling couldn't stand it anymore. She slapped the face of the crying swordsman. Did Guhan ask you to fight? Aren't you hiding safely in the void now? It's fine if you don't avenge the 200 million people who died. How dare you curse Guhan here? Who dares to cry again? Believe it or not, I'll kill you directly. Liuyan Ling's tough speech made the entire void quiet. Although Liuyan Ling looked very old, she still had her strength. Thinking of the scene when Liuyan Ling killed several Zhu Wu in a second, all the swordsmen couldn't help but shiver. Then, they shut their mouths obediently and didn't dare to make any sound. Liuyan Ling was right. The one fighting now was Guhan, and it had nothing to do with them. Moreover, the 12 Zhu Wu didn't have the ability to enter the void, so they were indeed in an absolutely safe place. Why would they cry? After scolding all the sword-bearers, Liuyan Ling disappeared into the crowd of 400 million people. At this moment, Liuyan Ling suddenly remembered that she had not paid attention to Wen Maiyun and Long Xiaoya for a long time. It was only now that Liuyan Ling suddenly recalled the existence of these two women. Her heart immediately became anxious. Liuyan Ling didn't know whether these two women entered the void with the crowd. If they didn't, things would be troublesome. After all, Long Xiaoya was pregnant with Guhan's flesh and blood. Liuyan Ling was already unable to give birth, so she suddenly had more hopes for the child in Long Xiaoya's belly. Liuyan Ling had to find Wen Maiyun and Long Xiaoya. However, the problem now was that quantum signals couldn't be transmitted in the void, so Liuyan Ling couldn't find Wen Maiyun and Long Xiaoya through her personal terminal. All Liuyan Ling could do was to look at the faces of the 400 million people until she saw Wen Maiyun and Long Xiaoya. On the other side, the battle had completely entered a heated state. Along with the disappearance of Zhu Rong's Samadhi True Fire, the area that had been burned by the Samadhi True Fire earlier had already been burnt into ashes. A part of the luxurious palace had also disappeared, and Ji Yuhan and Lu Shihua had also disappeared. He was burned to ashes just like that. What a useless thing, said Zhu Rong scornfully. However, Gong Gong, who was standing beside him, instantly changed his facial expression. He hurriedly pulled Zhu Rong behind him, and the moment Zhu Rong stepped back, a sharp long sword abruptly darted out of the void. If Gong Gong hadn't moved fast enough, Zhu Rong would have lost an arm under this sword, at least. Thank you. Zhu Rong thanked Gong Gong in panic, while Gong Gong expressionlessly pushed Zhu Rong away. It seemed that the conflict between Zhu Rong and Gong Gong was mostly a rumor. Otherwise, Gong Gong wouldn't have saved Zhu Rong's life at this critical moment. Damn it. How dare you trick me? I'm going to kill you. Zhu Rong, who had just barely survived, instantly became angry. He clenched his fingers in the air and countless fireballs emerged from around his body. All of these fireballs were made from the Samadhi True Fire. At the same time, these fireballs looked like living animals, madly searching for traces of Guhan in the air and launching attacks towards Guhan. Guhan snorted coldly. The heavenly sword held in his hand instantly drew a mysterious arc in the air, and all of those fireballs made from the Samadhi True Fire were instantly blown up. A part of the Samadhi True Fire even landed on the bodies of the other Zhu Wus, burning those Zhu Wus' bodies and leaving a burning smell on them. Zhu Rong, you little turkey. What are you doing? The rest of the ancestral sorcerers immediately cursed. Zhu Rong's face also turned a little red. He began to control more true Samadhi Fire fireballs to attack Ji Yuhan. However, the number of fireballs didn't mean anything. No matter how many fireballs Zhu Rong released, Guhan would always blow them up. The moment the fireballs exploded, Guhan dashed to Zhu Rong's side and pierced his heavenly sword into Zhu Rong's body. Although the heavenly sword was small, it contained a terrifying Jendi-level power. Zhu Rong's body was pierced by the heavenly sword, and instantly, a splendid flower blossomed on his body. Precious Zhu Wu's blood continuously dripped down from his body. This human is so strong. I can't beat him. After fighting for less than a minute, Zhu Rong, who had been incomparably arrogant a moment ago, had already started asking his brothers for help. Zhu Rong shockingly found out that if he couldn't get help from the other Zhu Wu's warriors, he might not even last 10 minutes under Guhan's sword. Not good. Zhu Rong can't beat this human. Only at this moment, the other Zhu Wu's warriors, who had been watching this fight as if it was a joke, realized that they were terribly wrong. This human being in front of them was terrifyingly powerful. He had actually made Zhu Rong, who had been so proud and arrogant, take the initiative to ask for help. This was something that had never happened back then, not even during the Great War between human and Magi. Zhu Rong, let me help you. Hu Tu, one of the Zhu Wu's warriors, launched the attack first. Streams of yellow-colored light, which represented the power of Earth, struck towards Guhan's body. Once these yellow-colored Earth powers touched Guhan's body, the gravity that Guhan's body had to bear would instantly increase by tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of times. In this way, Guhan wouldn't be able to keep moving at a high speed. For Zhu Wu's warriors, an opponent who couldn't move at a high speed was no different from a live target. Hu Tu's idea was good, and this kind of tactic had made countless masters of the demon clan suffer grievances on the spot. What made Hutu terrified was that at the moment when his khaki power of the earth swept towards Jiyu Han, three-sword Chis came out of nowhere from behind Jiyu Han and directly smashed Hutu's power of the earth. My earth power, earth rule power, has been shattered just like that. Hutu was overwhelmed with fear when he saw this. As far as Hutu knew, apart from the East Emperor Tai and Emperor Jun of the demon tribe, only the 6 sages hiding in the dark could break his power of rule. This human is really powerful. I'm afraid he's already on the verge of becoming a sage. But I'd like to see how powerful he is. At the same time, Emperor Jiang, the eldest of the 12 Zhu Wus, said to himself. Then, under his command, 4 more Zhu Wus joined the battlefield. 6 Zhu Wus began to besiege Guhan. My god. 6 Zhu Wus are attacking together. Hongjun Jendi is doomed. In the void, the sword-wielders who were watching the battle wailed again when they saw 4 more ancestral sorcerers joining the battle. In the minds of these swordsmen, it was already amazing that Guhan could deal with 2 Zhu Wus at the same time. However, when 6 Zhu Wus attacked him at the same time, it was not a power that a human could resist. Guhan was definitely doomed. The only difference was how long it would take. According to the estimation of some pessimistic swordsmen, Guhan might not even last 3 minutes. He would either have to escape through the void or die in the hands of Zhu Wus. Time ticked by. When the battle between the 6 Zhu Wus and Guhan reached the 30th minute, everyone was completely shocked. That was because Hongjun Jendi, who had disappeared for 20 years, was now constantly shuttling between the void and reality. He was engaged in a fierce battle with the 6 Zhu Wus. The power of 7 rules collided throughout Yuzhang City. The buildings within a radius of 100 kilometers around the core area had been completely razed to the ground. Meanwhile, the battle between Guhan and the 6 Zhu Wus was still going on. At this moment, Zhu Wus and Emperor Jiang's were as shocked as anyone else. Even during the Great Shaman-Demon War, East Emperor Tai and Emperor Jun of the Demon Clan did not have the ability to fight 6 Zhu Wus at the same time without using their primordial treasures. However, the human in front of them had done it. The battle between Guhan and the 6 Zhu Wus was still in a stalemate. From the looks of it, both sides were still evenly matched. It was naturally impossible for Guhan to kill one of the Zhu Wus alone, but it seemed that 6 Zhu Wus would take forever to kill Guhan. Guhan was able to block the 6 Zhu Wus with only the heaven-relieving sword in his hand. How terrifying his strength was. Such a powerful human. I've never heard of such a powerful being in the human clan since the Great Shaman-Demon War, Emperor Jiang exclaimed. However, a cold smile soon appeared on his face. Unfortunately, you're alone, but there are 6 of us. Chapter 1456. They've made their move. The remaining 6 Zhu Wus have made their move. Hongjun Jendi is in danger. In the void, the spectating swordsman suddenly screamed in terror. This was because the 6 Zhu Wus, who had been spectating, had joined the battle in an instant. The situation that Guhan was facing had instantly become 100 times more dangerous. When the scales were in a state of absolute balance, even a small straw could break the entire balance. When the 6 Zhu Wus joined the battle, the balance was almost broken. Guhan was instantly in a state of absolute danger. In an instant, countless rule powers hit Guhan's body. The personal shield on Guhan's body visibly lost a chunk of energy. This was an Emperor Sword-level personal shield, which had tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of energy. In terms of absolute energy, it was equivalent to 1/10 of a super-dimensional wall system's personal shield. Everyone, don't play with this human anymore. Fuse our rule powers together. At the same time, Dejiang sent his will to the other 11 Grand Sorcerer ancestors. The moment the will reached them, all 12 Grand Sorcerer ancestors blasted out their power of the rule at the same time. The power of the rule didn't go straight for Guanghan. Instead, it gathered on its own and entangled with each other like a fried dough twist. In the end, it formed a terrifying power of the rule that combined 12 different powers of the rule at the same time. Boom! The power of the 12 rule powers was extremely terrifying. These powers collided with Guhan's body at the same time, immediately triggering a huge explosion. Then, There was a terrifying shockwave that covered the sky and earth. This was not an ordinary shockwave, but a shockwave of rule powers produced by the entanglement of 12 rule powers. The direct effect of this shockwave was that the entire Yuzhang city's rule powers changed in an instant. The steel became as soft and flowing as water. The withered trees regained their youth and sprouted gold coins. The ruins around them shot into the sky like rockets because the gravity had shifted to the sky. In short, at this moment, the rules of Yuzhang City were reversed chaotically. The world shrouded by the shockwave turned into a grotesque world. All kinds of unimaginable things happened at the same time. The shockwave of the rules was so strong that it even began to directly impact the world inside the void. The entire void began to shake, causing the ordinary people to scream in pain. Fortunately, the power that Guhan used to seal the void was still there. The power that was originally used to trap the swordbearers had now become a wall that protected the humans, protecting them safely in the void and preventing them from being harmed by the rule shockwave. This human. He should be dead this time. Using such a powerful attack undoubtedly consumed a lot of energy for the 12 Zhu Wu. Therefore, even the 12 Zhu Wu could not help but start to pant after making the decisive blow. However, in the next second, something that infuriated the 12 ancestral sorcerers happened. When the shockwave of the rule dissipated gradually, an egg-like object shining with golden light appeared in front of the 12 ancestral sorcerers at the core of the rule explosion. "What is this?" said Zhu Rong while staring at this golden egg in shock. Following Zhu Rong's voice, the shell of this golden egg began peeling off bit by bit. At last, two unharmed human silhouettes emerged from the golden egg. "Master, I came just in time," Lu Shihua said weakly. In Lu Shihua's arms was Guhan, who was tightly hugged. Behind Lu Shihua were 12 wings flashing with pure white light. It was these 12 wings that protected Guhan and Lu Shihua. At the same time, they formed a golden egg and blocked the 12 Zhu Wu's powerful attack. "Well, your 12-winged angel sword is indeed unparalleled in the world in terms of defense. In terms of defense, even my sword Maiden can't compare to your 12-winged angel sword," Guhan said with a sigh. What Lu Shihua used just now was the ultimate skill of the 12-winged angel sword, Eternal Shelter. Its effect was to defend against all damage, no matter how powerful the damage was. Therefore, even if the 12 Zhu Wu's rule force gathered together, Eternal Shelter could still defend against it. It did not hurt Guhan at all. However, there was one thing that Guhan was very curious about. Eternal Shelter was said to be able to defend against all attacks. However, if it was an existence that surpassed the existence of an emperor's sword and reached the power of a sage, could Eternal Shelter still defend against the attack of a sage? "Master, these Zhu Wu are too shameless. They actually attacked you together. Let me fight alongside you." After the Eternal Shelter ended, Lu Shihua volunteered. "Nonsense. This is not a battle you can participate in." Guhan glared at Lu Shihua. "Your Eternal Shelter has already been used. Now, even Master can't guarantee your absolute safety. Go into the void immediately and come out when Master summons you." "But Master..." Lu Shihua was worried and wanted to say something. "Go in," Guhan said forcefully. Lu Shihua had no choice but to be sent into the void by Guhan. "Human, you are indeed very strong. We, the 12 Zhu Wu, admire the strong. You are worthy of our respect." When the 12 Zhu Wus saw that the 12 rule forces couldn't destroy Guhan, their intention to kill Guhan began to waver. Dijiang took the initiative to speak to Guhan. "Human, what I said before still stands. We, the Wu people, are willing to coexist peacefully with your human race. We can even help you when necessary. Get out of our way now, and we will leave immediately." "You can leave if you want. Give me back the 200 million lives of our human race." Faced with Dijiang's olive branch, Guhan still said without any hesitation. "Human race. We admit that you are strong, but don't be too arrogant. We can still use the attack just now hundreds of times, but how many times can you use that defensive method of yours?" Dijiang's expression also became cold. "It's useless to say more. Since you are so strong, then keep fighting." Guhan's expression became even colder. "Today, I want to tell everyone, that you have to pay the price for how many lives you have eaten from our human race. Good. Zhang praised, although you are very stupid, we, the Wu people, admire you. We respect you as a human hero, so we will send you to the end of a hero. Get ready. Zhang's thoughts moved again, and the 12 rule forces tangled with the 12 Zhu Wus again. This Hongjun Jendi, he really is a madman. He doesn't even know when to stop. Another spectating swordsman began to nag, but this time, no one else agreed with him. Faced with Guhan, who was fighting hard with Zhu Wu for the lives of 200 million humans, these swordsmen suddenly began to feel how small and pathetic they were. Their pitiful thoughts were nothing in front of Hongjun Jendi's imposing figure. Without Liuyan Ling's threat, these swordsmen were already sincerely admiring Guhan. At the same time, everyone's hearts were tangled together. The 12 Zhu Wus didn't know the ability of the Sword of Seraphim, but many of the swordsmen knew it like the back of their hands. If the Sword of Seraphim wanted to use Eternal Shelter again, they would have to wait for 10 minutes. In other words, now that Guhan had lost the protection of Eternal Shelter, how was Guhan going to defend against the 12 Zhu Wus combined rule forces? Faced with the combined rule forces that were about to attack again, Guhan's reaction was beyond the audience's expectations. Other than the heavenly sword in Guhan's right hand, he pulled out the Duyu sword from its scabbard with his left hand. Both swords were held in Guhan's hands at the same time. 2 swords. What does that mean? Seeing this scene, everyone was a little confused. Even an emperor sword wielder could only materialize the power of one sword lady at a time. Although it was not impossible to hold another sword lady in the other hand, this sword lady could only exist as a pure sword. Ji Yuhan had taken out his Duyu sword at this time. What exactly was he trying to do? No, look at the Duyu sword. There's light flowing on it. That's the power of the sword essence. This sword isn't just for show. It's a sword lady that can fight. The Ghost Palace sword Immortal suddenly shouted in surprise. At that moment, all the swordsmen realized that the heavenly sword and the Duyu sword in Guhan's hands were shining at the same time. This was proof that the sword essence was flowing through the 2 sword ladies. Go. When Guhan took out the 2 sword ladies, the 12 Zhu Wus combined rule forces were finally completed. Once again, they charged at Guhan. This time, Lu Shihua did not appear. Guhan only crossed the heavenly sword and the Duyu sword in his hands. Then, he slashed out 2 intersecting sword qis in a strange curve. The sword qi and the fused rule power collided directly in the air. Then, the fused rule power, which was incomparably powerful just now, was forcibly cut into 4 pieces under the attack of the 2 intersecting sword qi. The pieces flew in 4 different directions and finally crashed into different mountain ranges. The closest point of impact was 400 kilometers away from Yuzhang City. It was impossible to hurt Ji Yuhan. Alright, I've tasted your combined rule forces. Now, please have a taste of my yin-yang sword technique and chaos sword technique. This is what it means to return the favor. Chapter 1457. His 2F** King Strong. In the void, everyone looked at everything that was happening outside the battlefield with their mouths agape. Fighting with 2 sword maidens at the same time, the 12 Zhu Wus combined forces were completely suppressed by Guhan. With 2 swords in his hands, Guhan's combat power had a shocking increase. The 12 Zhu Wus' respective rule powers could be said to have reached the extreme. It seemed that there was no existence in the world that could surpass the 12 Zhu Wus in these rule powers. However, Guhan suppressed all the rule powers with just the 2 sword maidens in his hands. Just now, the combined attack of the 12 Zhu Wus' rule powers was directly smashed by Guhan's 2 swords, let alone other rule powers. Under Guhan's 2 swords, the 12 Zhu Wus' rule powers were directly slashed by the 2 swords before they could touch Guhan's body. In other words, facing Guhan with 2 swords in his hands, the 12 Zhu Wus couldn't even hurt Guhan. However, the rule power of the sword carried by Guhan's 2 swords could easily tear the skin and muscles of the Zhu Wus, causing great damage to the 12 Zhu Wus. Moreover, Guhan didn't use the tactic that Liuyan Ling used in the past, which was to concentrate all his power to attack one of the Kunzu. Guhan didn't have any intention of concentrating the attack. It was always the Zhu Wu who was closest to him that he would attack. Guhan's attacks were almost evenly distributed on the 12 Zhu Wu's bodies. With such a uniform attack method, the 12 Zhu Wus fell into an extremely embarrassing state in just a short 10 minutes. There were hundreds of wounds on each Zhu Wu's body. In an instant, all the Zhu Wu's bodies were soaked in blood. In terms of visual effects, it seemed that Guhan had made all the Zhu Wus stand on the edge of death. Isn't this Hong Jun Sword Emperor a little too abnormally strong? He's actually suppressing 12 Zhu Wus. Countless sword bearers looked at the battle in front of them in disbelief. They couldn't imagine the scene of a human suppressing 12 Zhu Wus. Oh my god, is this really the 12 Zhu Wus who destroyed 7 base cities and almost wiped out the human race? Seeing the battle in front of them, an immortal sword realm sword bearer began to tremble uncontrollably. He couldn't even hold the sword in his hand anymore. He had never dared to imagine that a human could actually be this powerful. I didn't know that there could be such a huge gap between Emperor Sword Realm sword bearers. Even Longsha Jendi couldn't help but tremble, because Longsha Jendi found that even if he were to return to his prime, 20 of himself stacked on top of each other, he still wouldn't be a match for Guhan. I can't believe I was once an opponent of such a person, and I even sealed his purple palace. The sword immortal of Gui Hall couldn't help but recall the conflict that had happened more than 20 years ago. At that time, all he could think about was how to find Guhan to take revenge and how to defeat Guhan. But now, it seemed that it was impossible for him to even catch up with Guhan's shadow, let alone defeat Guhan. Can His Majesty Hong Jun Jendi really kill 12 Zhu Wus? A famed sword realm sword bearer couldn't help but ask. I'm afraid that won't be possible. The sword immortal of Gui Hall sighed when he heard this question. It can't be. The 12th witch ancestor has suffered so many injuries. Isn't it a sign that he's about to be defeated? The famed sword rank swordsman said. You're a famed sword realm sword bearer, and you've never fought with 12 Zhu Wus. It's not surprising that you don't know about this. The sword immortal of Gui Hall sighed. The 12 Zhu Wus' greatest strength is actually their terrifying recovery ability. The sword immortal of Gui Hall wasn't wrong. The most terrifying thing about Zhu Wus was indeed not the powerful rule powers that they had mastered, but the terrifying recovery ability of their bodies. Legend had it that the 12 Zhu Wus' bodies came from the ancient god Pangu, and the entire world was created by Pangu. Since the 12 Zhu Wus inherited Pangu's body, they also inherited the terrifying recovery ability of Pangu's body. Even if they cut a wound big enough to dig out their heart, the wound would automatically heal in less than 10 seconds. Humans had fully experienced this in the fierce battles against the 12 Zhu Wus over the past 4 to 5 years. No matter how serious the damage was caused to the 12 Zhu Wus' body, after 5 minutes, the 12 Zhu Wus' body would automatically heal itself as if it had never been injured. It was precisely because of this that humans had no choice but to come up with a quick and concentrated decapitation strategy. Thanks to the terrifying attack power of the human Dao Sword Lady, they were able to kill one of the Zhu Wus' bodies in a short period of time even with Liu Yanling's power. If they were given enough time, the wounds would automatically heal themselves. What the 12 Grand Sorcerer ancestors did next proved the sword immortal of Gui Palace's words. When the 12 Grand Sorcerer ancestors saw that they and their brothers were covered in blood and wounds, they suddenly unleashed their power of the natural order toward their opponents, forming a link that looked like a ring. As the power of the rule connected, the hundreds of wounds left by Guhan on the 12 Zhu Wus' body began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Zhu Wus' blood began to flow back into the wounds. In just 10 seconds, all the wounds left by Guhan had disappeared, and the 12 Zhu Wus' powerful body became perfect again. This won't do. Guhan can't break the 12 Zhu Wus' healing ability. Seeing this, the sword immortal of Gui Hall clenched his fists and said. He really wanted to rush out of the void and tell Guhan to stop attacking separately. Instead, he wanted to concentrate all his strength and kill one Zhu Wu first. Unfortunately, Guhan in the sky didn't seem to have any intention of doing so. He just looked at the 12 Zhu Wus' body that had returned to its perfect state. Human, you're really strong to be able to force us to use the 12 Zhu Wus' power to heal ourselves. However, As you can see, it's impossible for you to defeat us. Zhu Wu Dejiang said to Gu Han. Also, don't think about concentrating your strength to kill one of us like before. To be honest, the reason why that human of yours could kill us in this way was because we purposely revealed our weakness. It's just a flaw that we've deliberately revealed. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to find a reasonable reason to lose to you and allow the 13th Grand Wizard to swallow our Grand Wizard's blood orb without worry. As long as the 12 of us stand together and combine our power of rules, all our injuries can be healed instantly. Even if that woman uses her terrifying power again, she won't be able to kill us, unless you can unleash a power that's 12 times stronger than that woman. Zhu Wu Dejiang didn't mind revealing the 12 Zhu Wu's abilities and trump cards. However, after hearing these abilities and trump cards, the surrounding sword-bearers became even more desperate. Liuyan Ling's power was obtained by sacrificing a year of the lifespan of 400 million humans. If this power was multiplied by 12 times, wouldn't all humans have to sacrifice 12 years of their lifespan? Even if humans were willing to make such a huge sacrifice, Gu Han wasn't Liuyan Ling. Without the human sword lady, he couldn't unleash such a terrifying attack. As for Liuyan Ling, who could use the human sword lady, she already looked like an old woman. To bear the human's lifespan, she also had to pay the price of her own lifespan. She had borne it 7 times before, which had turned Liuyan Ling from a powerhouse at her peak into an old lady who looked like she was in her 70s or 80s. Now, Liuyan Ling might not even be able to bear a year of the lifespan of 400 million humans. Why don't we negotiate for peace? The 12 Zhu Wus are really like sticky candy. If we continue to fight like this, once Hongjun Jendi consumes all the sword elements, we humans will really be finished. Another sword-bearer had such a thought. Human. I'll tell you again, we, the Wu people, have no intention of fighting with you humans. We just want to find a place to live quietly and reproduce the Wu people again. Please get out of the way. Zhu Wu's Dejiang extended an olive branch again. Hehe, in that case, I'll add a little seasoning for you. Facing the 12 Zhu Wu's terrifying recovery ability, Gu Han didn't have any expression of fear. Instead, he said with a smile. Seasoning. The 12 Zhu Wus felt a little baffled. He had no idea what Gu Han was talking about. At the next moment, Gu Han's action made the 12 Zhu Wus even more baffled. This was because Gu Han took out a piece of flesh from his dimensional pocket. Then, this piece of flesh in Gu Han's hand shattered into countless pieces and was evenly scattered on the 2 sword ladies by Gu Han. What the hell is this? Is this piece of flesh the seasoning? The sword bearers looked at the scene in front of them dumbfoundedly. At the same time, they thought to themselves, if this piece of flesh was the seasoning that Gu Han was talking about, then wouldn't the 2 sword ladies that Gu Han sprinkled with seasoning be Gu Han's dishes? Could it be that Gu Han wanted to eat the 2 sword ladies? The sword bearers didn't have time to think too much because in the next moment, Gu Han and the 12 Zhu Wus fought again. After more than 10 minutes of bloody battle, the 12 Zhu Wu's body was once again covered with hundreds of wounds. However, when the 12 Zhu Wus prepared to transfer the 12 Zhu Wu's rule force to each other and then see his body return to its perfect state, the 12 Zhu Wu was horrified to find that his body was exactly the same as before. Not only did the wounds not show any signs of healing, but they were torn even more violently. Chapter 1458. The 12 Zhu Wu panicked and kept using his Zhu Wu power, but the wound still showed no signs of healing. Instead, it got bigger and bigger as time went by. The blood flowing from the wound had almost drowned half of the core area, and a huge lake of blood was gradually forming under the 12 Zhu Wu's feet. The blood was flowing from the 12 Zhu Wu's wounds. Could it be caused by the flesh that Gu Han sprinkled on the sword just now? The 12 Zhu Wu suddenly thought of the seasoning that Gu Han had mentioned just now and said in a sudden realization. Human race. What kind of vicious flesh and blood did you sprinkle on your sword just now? Is this the flesh and blood of a primordial innate demon god? The Zhu Wu questioned Gu Han in anger and fear. In the 12 Zhu Wu's mind, only the flesh and blood of the legendary innate demon god could hinder his body's recovery ability. What innate demon god? I've never heard of it. Guhan smiled and then directly took out a piece of flesh that was exactly the same as before from his dimensional pocket and said, "This is just an ordinary piece of pork." Pork! The 12 Zhu was stunned at first, and then he was enraged. Human race. At this time, why do you still use such a despicable thing to insult us? Even if we are opponents, you can't humiliate us like this. The Zhu scolded. In the 12 Zhu's mind, Guhan was clearly lying to them when he said that the piece of flesh was pork. At the same time, he was also insulting them in this way. Even the flesh and blood of a pig could make the 12 Zhu lose their terrifying recovery ability. Wasn't this mocking the 12 Zhu that they were inferior to pigs? I really didn't lie to you. This is really just pork. Guhan shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly. To be honest, Guhan did not lie to the 12 Zhu. The flesh just now was really just pork, but Guhan attached some interesting things to the powdered pork. Do you still remember when Guhan constructed a small world with fragments of his consciousness in his dimensional pocket? Guhan used ordinary pork and his consciousness fragments to build a complete world on a small scale. In fact, Guhan was just repeating the same trick. He mixed a trace of his consciousness fragments on the pork and produced countless creatures at the same time. These creatures were sprinkled on Guhan's sword and then left on Zhu's wounds through Guhan's sword. Under Guhan's control, they constantly attacked Zhu's wounds. Hence, the piece of flesh just now was indeed just a piece of pork. The ones that caused fatal damage to the wizard ancestor were the fragments of consciousness that had evolved from the flesh. No. Big brother, no. Use Pangu's force to feel those wounds. Zhu's Gomang suddenly said in shock. Zhu's Dejiang was stunned and immediately used the most precious Pangu's force in his body to feel these wounds. Then, Dejiang discovered that countless tiny creatures were frantically tearing at his wounds. There were more than 10 million of these tiny creatures. At the same time, because of these tiny creatures tearing at his wounds, no matter how hard he tried to heal them, they would be torn apart by these creatures at the same time. As a result, they couldn't heal at all. What was even more terrifying was that these tiny creatures could constantly absorb the flesh that belonged to Zhu and use it to strengthen their bodies. Therefore, as time passed, these tiny creatures grew larger and larger and caused more and more damage to Zhu's wounds. This was the root cause of Zhu's wounds that couldn't heal and were constantly expanding. Zhu's Shenming also sensed the existence of these tiny creatures and couldn't help but ask Zhu's Dejiang, "Big brother, is this some kind of poisonous insect?" No, it's not a poisonous insect. It's the chaos thought. This human has actually mastered the chaos thought. Zhu's Dejiang suddenly said in extreme fear. This sentence also made the rest of the Zhu's fall into a state of extreme fear. This human has mastered the chaos thought. Is this human already a saint? Zhu's Zhurong cried out in shock. No, this human isn't a saint yet. Otherwise, we would already be dead. Dejiang hurriedly said, I heard that the chaos thought is the only way to become a saint. Mastering the chaos thought is already half a step into the saint realm. This human should be in this state right now. Then what should we do? Damn it, could it be that humans were the eternal protagonists of this world? Why is there an existence that is half a step into the saint realm among humans? Are we Wu people going to repeat the mistakes of the past? Zhu's Gonggong said helplessly and sorrowfully. It's not to this extent. Zhu's Dejiang said coldly, but this human must die. Otherwise, our plan of exterminating humans and reviving the Wu people and making the Wu people the protagonists of this world won't be able to come true. Originally, I thought that all the saints were dead. Therefore, this is a great opportunity bestowed to us, the Wu people. It's a sign that the gods want us, the Wu people, to become the protagonists of this world again. However, I didn't expect that there would be an existence that is half a step into the saint realm among humans. Then, he will be the biggest obstacle for us, the Wu people. Therefore, this time, we must kill him. Eliminate all future troubles. But how are we going to kill this human? He's already half a step into the realm of a sage. There's no way we can kill him. As long as he has the chaos myriad thoughts, he can be revived. How are we going to kill him? Ancestral wizard Gomang asked in despair. No, only a saint can resurrect with just a primal chaos thought. This human definitely can't do it now. This is our only chance. Zhu Wu's Dejiang suddenly had an extremely serious expression on his face. He looked at the other 12 Zhu Wus and gulped. Brothers and sisters, it seems like we have to use the 12 Divine Fiends formation. 12 Divine Fiends formation? The other 12 Zhu Wus were stunned. They never expected to hear this name from Dejiang. They never thought that they would reach the point where they had to use the 12 Divine Fiends formation. However, on second thought, this seemed to be the only way. Only the 12 Divine Fiends formation would have the chance to kill an existence that is half a step into the saint realm. All right. The 12 Zhu Wu's thoughts exchanged at the same time and instantly made up their minds. The above conversation seemed to have gone on for a long time, but it was actually just an exchange of thoughts between the 12 Zhu Wus. From start to finish, it took less than a second. Therefore, in the eyes of the spectators, after the 12 Zhu Wus questioned Guhan, the 12 Zhu Wus suddenly began to spread out in 12 different directions. They no longer gathered together like before. This made the spectators feel a little strange. If the 12 Zhu Wus didn't gather together and instead fought separately, wouldn't the 12 Zhu Wus suddenly start to spread out in 12 different directions? Wouldn't that repeat the previous mistake of being defeated by Guhan one by one? However, right after that, the 12 Zhu Wus stopped in an instant. If there was someone who understood the innate tendency to lose here, they would realize that the 12 Zhu Wus were standing in the 12 Juqian positions. The 12 Zhu Wus were obviously about to use an extremely terrifying formation. Immediately after that, something even more unimaginable happened. The 12 Zhu Wus' bodies actually disappeared in an instant. In fact, they didn't really disappear, because after the 12 Zhu Wus' bodies disappeared, they were replaced by 12 huge flags that stood upright in 12 different directions. The moment these flags took shape, the top of the flags was like a high-pressure water gun, and endless bright red blood began to gush out. The 12 streams of blood collided in the air and finally gathered together, condensing out of thin air. At this moment, a human body made of blood that was even larger than the 12 Zhu Wus slowly took shape. Oh my God! What the hell is this? Seeing this scene in front of them, the sword-bearers in the void had a dumbfounded look on their faces. Although they didn't know what the 12 Zhu Wus' blood had gathered to form, they could imagine that this thing that the 12 Zhu Wus were trying to fuse with their own blood must be unprecedented. This is the legendary Great 12 Divine Fiend formation. As he watched the majestic and terrifying figure gradually take shape, Guhan didn't have the slightest intention of stopping it. Instead, his entire body began to tremble uncontrollably with excitement. This was what Guhan wanted, and it was also the most crucial step for Guhan to perfect the next part of his plan. In other words, this Great 12 Divine Fiend formation had actually been deliberately guided by Guhan to let the 12 Zhu Wus use. Although Guhan's goal had been achieved, he didn't have the slightest idea of how to deal with this monster that was about to be born. Although this monster had been forced out by Guhan, Guhan didn't know whether he could defeat it and obtain what he wanted in the end. This was because Guhan simply didn't know how terrifying the true strength of this soon-to-be-born primogenitor of the heavens and earth would be. If the extent of its terror exceeded Guhan's expectations, then even Guhan would probably be dead. But this was a path that Guhan had no choice but to take, because Guhan knew that he didn't have much time left. What? Xiao Wei is still in Yuzhang City. Liuyan Ling looked at the woman in front of her, who was already extremely weak, and shouted loudly, losing her composure. I'm sorry. Xiao Wei said that she was about to give birth, so she wanted to go to the hospital to find a medical pod to help her deliver the baby. But there were too many people, and we were separated. I really can't find her. Your Majesty, I beg you, save Xiao Wei. That's right. Hurry and tell Master that Xiao Wei still has his child in her stomach. Wen Maiyun tightly held onto Liuyan Ling's hand as she pleaded. I'm afraid it's too late. It's already a wasteland outside, no one could have survived. Liuyan Ling looked helplessly at Yuzhang City, which had been completely turned into a wasteland by the battle between Guhan and the 12 Zhu Wu. Under such a terrifying battle and the impact of the power of rules, unless Xiao Wei was an emperor sword wielder, it was impossible for her to survive. I'm sorry. My condolences. Liuyan Ling poured a bottle of nano capsule into Wen Meiyun's stomach, and then said helplessly to Wen Meiyun. At this time, Liuyan Ling did not intend to tell this news to Gu Han. At this time, the battle between Gu Han and the 12 Zhu Wu had reached its most crucial moment. If Gu Han knew that his own son was likely to die by his hands, who knew what would happen to Gu Han? Chapter 1459. The 12 Zhu Wus have actually fused together. Seeing the blood of the 12 Zhu Wus fusing into an even larger humanoid creature, the sword-bearers in the void exclaimed in horror. What on earth have they fused into? Could it be that Ying Zheng has been reformed? Another sword-wielder guessed. No, I'm afraid this isn't Ying Zheng, but the legendary Pangu. Long Shi Jiandi said hesitantly, looking at the monster formed by the 12 divine fiends formation. Pangu? What kind of Yuan Ku is that? How come I've never heard of this name? Many sword-bearers shook their heads, indicating that they had never heard of this name. That is the legendary existence who once split heaven and earth apart, and created the entire world. At some point, Liuyan Ling had returned to the group of sword-bearers, but behind her was Wen Meiyun, who seemed to be in a daze. It seems that Ying Zheng was right. The 12 Zhu Wus were indeed split from Pangu's body, and now, they have actually fused Pangu together, Liuyan Ling said, clenching her fists. She knew that Gu Han was facing a great crisis this time. Pangu. Looking at the enormous existence in front of him, whose head held up the sky and feet stood on the ground, as if supporting the entire world, Gu Han couldn't help but look up at it. Under the effect of the 12 divine fiends formation, the fused Pangu seemed to have lost its nature as a living creature. Its body was emitting dense smoke, and its eyes were pitch black. After letting out a series of thunderous gasps, all the objects around Pangu floated up in the air in an instant. Then, under Gu Han's astonished gaze, all these ruins flew into Pangu's hands, and started changing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The change was the change of the original substance itself. These were the ruins of buildings, plastics, broken airships, and even some human corpses and flesh. But now, these ruins, which were composed of thousands of different materials, directly turned into the same material, a jet-black metal that looked like black gold. More and more materials began to gather in Pangu's hand. Finally, when more than half of the ruins of Yuzhang City were gathered in Pangu's hand, the gathering finally stopped. At the same time, an axe the same size as Pangu appeared in Pangu's hand. Pan Jiyu had directly changed the nature of most of the objects in the ruins of Yuzhang City. From more than 30 million different substances, they had all been changed into the same substance. Finally, they had combined into the huge axe in Pangu's hand, which was the legendary Pangu axe. Boom! Pangu still did not speak, but Pangu had already moved. Pangu raised the axe in his hand high, and then chopped down at Gu Han in front of him. Pangu's attack speed is so slow, it looks like it's moving in slow motion. How can such an attack hit Hong Jun Jendi? Seeing Pangu's attack, the sword-bearers, who had their hearts in their throats just now, were instantly relieved. Because Pangu's attack speed was way too slow, it took him a full 10 seconds to make a downward slash. Even an ordinary human could easily dodge such a slash, not to mention Ji Yu Han, who had a terrifying agility. In everyone's mind, even if Gu Han had 2 broken legs, he could still easily avoid Pangu's attack, not to mention that Gu Han was now in his peak state. But in everyone's eyes, Gu Han stayed where he was, motionless, and then the axe chopped down on Gu Han's body. Gu Han was instantly smashed to the ground, creating a huge cloud of dust that covered the whole world. What's going on? Why didn't Hong Jun Jendi dodge? He dodged it. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. They could not understand why Gu Han didn't dodge Pangu's attack when Pangu's attack speed was so slow. Of course, they would not think that Gu Han was a fool who did not know how to fight. Otherwise, Gu Han, who had defeated 12 Zhu Wu with his own strength, would not be able to fight back. Something that they did not know must have happened during the battle, so that Gu Han could not dodge Pangu's attack at all. Gu Han! Liuyan Ling called out worriedly. At that moment, the smoke began to gradually disperse and settle on the ground again. Everyone saw that Gu Han was still standing in the same place, and he was lying on the ground like a dead dog. The sharp-eyed sword-bearers were horrified to find that Guhan, who was lying on the ground, only had half of his body left. The other half of his body had disappeared from his neck. Golden flesh and messy internal organs were scattered on the ground. He looked like a slaughtered pig. Guhan. Seeing this, Liuyan Ling felt her vision go black, and then she fainted. When a human's body was cut to such an extent, and there was no medical pod nearby that could heal him in time, even if he was an emperor swordbearer, he was basically sentenced to death. Look, Hong Jun Jendi is not dead yet. His body is healing quickly. A swordbearer's joyful voice pulled Liuyan Ling back from her coma. Liuyan Ling hurriedly looked at Guhan, who was lying on the ground. She was shocked to find that the remaining half of Guhan's body was growing rapidly. The flesh and blood were growing continuously. In less than 10 seconds, half of Guhan's body had grown back. Other than looking a little embarrassed and naked, he was no different from a normal human. Oh my God! Such a powerful healing ability. This healing ability is comparable to Zhu Wu's healing ability. Seeing this, many swordbearers felt that their eyes had been blinded again. They never dared to imagine that a human, even an emperor swordbearer, could have such a terrifying physical healing ability. Fortunately, I have a consciousness fragment. Otherwise, I would have died just now. Having regrown half of his body, Guhan, who had been resurrected, controlled his trembling muscles and slowly sat up from the ground. It was true that Pan Ji had split him into two with his axe. If Guhan had not used the consciousness fragment to control his body's rapid recovery, Guhan would have died. This was the terrifying power of the consciousness fragment. Even if he had lost half of his body, he could completely recover within 10 seconds. This was a terrifying recovery speed that even a 12-year-old Zhu Wu could not achieve. According to Ji Yuhan's estimation, if he could improve his control over the fragment of consciousness, then even if there was only a small fragment of consciousness left, he would be able to completely restore his entire body. This was the terror of someone who was half a step into the saint realm, an existence that was almost completely undying. However, although Guhan, who was half a step into the saint realm, was terrifying, Pan Ji, who was in front of Guhan, was the most terrifying existence. Pan Gu's axe strike just now had frightened Guhan. In everyone's eyes, Guhan stayed in the air like an idiot, letting Pan Ji cut him into two with his axe. However, if someone could share what Guhan had sensed at this moment, that person would be horrified to find that it was not that Guhan did not want to run, but that he had nowhere to run. Just now, the moment Pan Ji wielded his axe, Guhan had already started running. He boosted his speed to an extreme, trying to get away from Pan Gu's attack range within a moment. In Guhan's senses, he had indeed boosted his speed to an extreme, and he could even see the surrounding scenery changing quickly. However, when Guhan stopped, he was shocked to find that he was still standing in the same spot, without moving even an inch. At first, Guhan thought that this was an illusion, but soon, Guhan found out that this wasn't an illusion. His body had indeed been moving at an extreme speed. However, the space around him seemed to have been fixed, as if the space he was in had been separated from the space of the earth. This was a mysterious feeling, and even now, Guhan couldn't clearly explain what had happened. However, the only thing Guhan knew was that he couldn't run away from Pan Gu's axe at all. He could only be cut into two by Pan Gu's axe, and there was no other ending for him. Fortunately, Pan Ji didn't seem to be able to use such a terrifying attack at will. Otherwise, when Guhan was healing his body, Pan Ji launched another strike at Guhan, and half of Guhan's body would be paralyzed. In fact, Pan Ji stood still, letting Guhan heal his body. However, as soon as Guhan finished healing, Pan Ji waved the Pangu axe in his hand again. This battle was a complete replica of the previous one. Facing Pan Gu's axe, Guhan also lost the ability to escape. He watched helplessly as Pan Gu's axe cut his body in half again. This time, half of Guhan's head was also split open, and snow-white brain juice flowed directly from Guhan's skull. This was an injury that even the medical cabin at the Immortal Sword tier could not heal. The minimum requirement for a medical cabin at the Immortal Sword tier was to keep a head, but half of Guhan's head was gone. Could Guhan really come back to life again? Master. At this time, under a sand dune not far away, a pair of eyes was watching everything that was happening not far away. Crystal tears flowed from the corners of her eyes. She wanted to rush up and help her master, who only had half a head left, but she couldn't move. Her body had been completely buried by the sand dune. Chapter 1460. Long Xiaoya did not know why she was buried under this sand dune. She felt that her abdomen was constantly beating, and at the same time, a sense of swelling kept wandering in her body. Long Xiaoya knew that she was about to give birth. This was the child in her stomach telling her that it wanted to come out. Therefore, Long Xiaoya decided to go to a nearby hospital to get a medical cabin to help her give birth on the way. As a result, when she changed directions, she was washed away by the surging crowd. Long Xiaoya suddenly could not find her mother anymore. What was even more tragic was that Long Xiaoya, who had a big belly, was suddenly knocked to the ground by a man running fast. She tried hard to stand up, but more people behind her did not care about the existence of a pregnant woman on the ground. Some people even directly stepped over Long Xiaoya's protruding belly. The great pain directly made Long Xiaoya faint. When Long Xiaoya woke up again, she was already buried under a large pile of sand dune. If it were not for a hurricane that happened to blow away the sand dune that buried Long Xiaoya's head, Long Xiaoya would have suffocated under the sand dune. But now, Long Xiaoya's situation was not much better. Her abdomen was still pressed by a large amount of sand, and what was more terrifying was that waves of pain inside her abdomen kept rushing at Long Xiaoya's nerves. Just when Long Xiaoya was about to faint again from the pain, she saw the scene of Guhan being split in half by Pangu's huge painting. She also saw Guhan's brain splattering like an exploding coconut. Long Xiaoya could not accept the scene in front of her at all. This heart-wrenching roar, and with this roar, Long Xiaoya instantly felt that her stomach was lighter. This feeling was as if the feces that had accumulated for 20 years were all poured out at this moment. I gave birth. Long Xiaoya, who was in the abyss of suffering, suddenly realized that the child that had been in her stomach for 20 years was finally born. At the moment when his father died, he was born. Resurrected. Hong Jun Jendi is not dead yet, he is still alive. His head is recovering. When the sword-bearers saw Guhan's head split in half and his brains splattering everywhere, they thought that Guhan was completely dead. Unexpectedly, in just a few seconds, Guhan's head had completed self-repair, and the rest of his body was still recovering rapidly. Perhaps it was because he had deliberately repaired his head, but his recovery speed seemed to be a lot slower than before. After 10 seconds, only half of Guhan's body had been repaired. But 10 seconds passed, and Pangu attacked again. Once again, Guhan was unable to dodge and was cleaved into two halves by the Pangu axe, and this time, Guhan only had 1/4 of his body left. 10 seconds passed, and the scene of Guhan being cleaved into two by Pangu's axe kept repeating. Although Guhan was extremely strong and tried to repair his body every time, the recovery speed of Guhan's body continued to slow down. However, the recovery speed of Ji Yuhan's body was slowing down, while Pangu's attack speed was always maintained at the rate of 1 attack every 10 seconds. What was more frightening was that Pan Ji would always aim at Ji Yuhan's head first. Therefore, every time Guhan finally repaired his head would immediately be chopped into pieces by Pangu's axe. The whole scene was like a ridiculous video replay. Don't do this. Liuyan Ling sat weakly in the void. Seeing Guhan's head being chopped into pieces again and again, Liuyan Ling felt extremely painful in her heart. She even thought that Guhan should just die like this, which was much better than constantly suffering the pain of being chopped into pieces. My child, Mommy must save you. You are Daddy's only child, Mommy must save you. Long Xiaoya, who was buried in the thick sand dunes, began to struggle to save herself. Or rather, she began to struggle to save her child. Long Xiaoya could feel a fragile life between her legs, but the sand dunes had already filled up the gap between her legs. If she did not let her child escape from the sand dunes, he would be suffocated to death by the sand dunes. No matter how fragile a woman was, after becoming a mother, she would have unimaginable power. Therefore, Long Xiaoya's body began to move even though she was buried under hundreds of kilograms of sand. Long Xiaoya slightly bent her legs upwards, hoping to use this to create a small space for her child to breathe. At the same time, Long Xiaoya's buried hands also erupted with unbelievable power, pushing the sand away bit by bit. In the end, when the sand that was buried in Long Xiaoya's hands was completely pushed away, Long Xiaoya's hands were finally freed, which also meant that the upper half of Long Xiaoya's body was freed. Digging the sand. Long Xiaoya began to frantically dig the sand around her lower body. As the thick layer of sand was gradually dug away, a smooth little head covered in wet, grayish-black, and extremely soft fetal hair finally appeared in front of Long Xiaoya. "Child, my child." Long Xiaoya grabbed her child's head, then forcefully pulled it out as if she was pulling a carrot. This newborn little life finally struggled out from the edge of death, and saw the sun from this world for the first time. "Child, my child." Long Xiaoya used all her strength to raise her child to the highest point, letting her child face the rising sun and let out its first loud cry since coming to this world. I can't make it. I really shouldn't have taken such a risk." Guhan's consciousness was actually a little chaotic at this time. Every time his body was repaired, it was not without consumption. Every time, there would be fragments of Guhan's consciousness disappearing. Although Guhan had billions of fragments of consciousness, in order to destroy 12 Zhu Wu's recovery ability, Guhan had already consumed a lot of fragments of consciousness. And every time he tried to resurrect his body, as many as tens of millions of fragments of consciousness would disappear. Just when Guhan was left with less than 100 million fragments of consciousness, he would completely lose the ability to resurrect after 2 or 3 more such attacks, and really die under Pangu's axe. A loud cry faintly reached Guhan's ears. This is life. A child was actually born in such an environment. Guhan thought incredulously. He thought that everyone had died, but he never thought that there would be a survivor around him, and this survivor actually tenaciously gave birth to a new life. "Child, I'm sorry. It's all my fault." There was a bit of regret in Guhan's heart. The pregnant woman who was unwilling to escape into the void might have been looking for trouble and seeking her own death, but the child in her belly was innocent. He deserved such a fate. It was Guhan who harmed him. But this child's voice is so familiar. I seem to have heard such a voice in my dream. When did I hear it? It gives me a feeling of being haunted by it. Guhan was probably somewhat obsessed with the child's cry. He tilted his head, wanting his ears to hear the child's cry more clearly. Naturally, Guhan felt something fall on his head, but it did not attack his body. Then, his body flew out under the effect of some kind of impact. That was the attack of Pangu's axe just now. Guhan, who was flying in the air, thought. I actually avoided the attack of Pangu's axe. This time, Pangu's axe actually did not attack me. Thinking of this, Guhan's entire consciousness trembled, and then his consciousness, which was about to completely dissipate, completely recovered. Guhan suddenly realized that he could move. His head had just successfully avoided the attack of Pangu's axe, and his body could move. Why is this happening? Although Guhan's heart was full of such doubts, he did not have time to think about it. The remaining fragments of consciousness began to frantically repair his body. At the same time, Guhan's eyes stared at the blade of Pangu's axe, while silently counting the time in his heart. 10, 7, 4, 1. In fact, Guhan did not need it, because the speed at which Pangu swung the axe was not fast. The moment Pangu once again raised the axe, Guhan once again heard the loud cry of the baby. Guhan's body, which had just been repaired, rolled on the ground in a strange posture, and then Pangu's axe fell on the position where Guhan was just now. Guhan once again successfully avoided the attack of Pangu's axe. And this time, the remaining 10 seconds were enough for Guhan to repair the rest of his body. Guhan barely supported his new body to stand up from the ground, watching the tall Pangu once again raise the axe in his hand. Clang. This time, Guhan still did not escape, but Pangu's axe did not attack Guhan's body either, because Guhan simultaneously raised 2 sword ladies high in his hands, crossed them, and forcibly blocked the blade of Pangu's axe. So it is the power of creation. Only the power of creation of life can break through Pangu's seal. At the moment when Pangu's axe was blocked, Guhan's heart was clear. The remaining tens of millions of fragments of consciousness, at this moment, all seemed to have become seeds full of life, blooming a tender breath of life against the cold sun. Finally, I can see my path clearly. Such a sigh gushed out from Guhan's heart. At the moment of life and death, Guhan finally got a small part of what he wanted, and the rest of the things were placed in front of him for him to take. At the critical moment, it was this loud cry that not only changed the fate of Guhan, but also the fate of the entire human race. Chapter 1461. My child. Long Xiaoya, who was struggling hard, suddenly felt that her hand had loosened. She knew that her child had been taken away. She immediately wanted to break free from the sand dune in horror and take back her child. However, after losing her child, it was as if Long Xiaoya had lost all her strength. She could no longer break free from the sand dunes. Just as Long Xiaoya was feeling hopeless, her body suddenly felt light. The sand dunes that were pressing down on her had all disappeared. She had regained her freedom once again. Master. At this time, Long Xiaoya finally saw clearly who had saved her from the sand dune. She looked at Guhan in front of her with joy. After 20 years, she finally saw her master again. Master, aren't you? Long Xiaoya suddenly remembered the scene of Guhan being cut in half by the giant axe. She immediately wanted to ask something in a panic. However, Guhan's hand gently placed on Long Xiaoya's forehead and said faintly, "Don't ask now. Let's change places first." Long Xiaoya did not understand what was going on. She felt herself being hugged by the cold, and the next moment, she was moved to another place. Long Xiaoya looked back at the sand dune where she had been lying. The huge Pangu axe had already chopped down on the place where she had been lying, and the entire sand dune had turned into ashes. If Jiyu Han had been a second late, Long Xiaoya would have been the one who would have been split in half. Master. Long Xiaoya was so scared that her heart was about to jump out of her throat. Guhan said with a smile, "Don't panic. It was just a fake stupid thing. It was easy to avoid. Master. It's good that you are okay. Xiaoya's life and death are not important. It's good that you are okay," Long Xiaoya said with a sobbing tone. It had been more than 20 years. With the appearance of Guhan, so many years of grievances and pain seemed to have disappeared. "It's okay. It's okay now." Guhan comforted her again. Then, he looked at the baby in his arms. The baby's hair had not yet been removed. Looking at the baby's face, which was somewhat similar to his own, he already understood. "This is my child. En." Long Xiaoya nodded her head vigorously. Then, she suddenly thought of something and said in a panic, "Master, please don't misunderstand. I didn't do anything to let you down. This child was conceived when you left. I don't know why it stayed in my stomach for 20 years until you appeared today. I really didn't do anything wrong to you." Long Xiaoya thought that Guhan suspected that the child was not his own. This was a very normal concern. After all, Guhan had been missing for 20 years. Who would believe that a child born 20 years later would still be his own flesh and blood? Say no more. From the moment I heard this child crying, I knew it was my child, because it sounded exactly the same as when I was a child, said Guhan gently. Then, he hugged Long Xiaoya, who was in a panic, and moved again. Pangu's Pangu axe smashed on the place where Guhan had been standing just now. "This place feels like it's connected by blood. This is my child." Jiyu Han placed his hand on the baby's chest. As his father's hand pressed on the baby's chest, the baby who had been crying all this while quieted down in an instant. Then, the baby let out a giggle and seemed to be very happy. "I didn't think I had a son." Looking at his own flesh and blood in his arms, Guhan couldn't help but sigh. This child was something that Guhan had never thought of. He didn't think that he had a son besides Jiyu Xuanwu. If he hadn't come back in time, this child would have died in this battlefield, and he would have regretted it for the rest of his life. "This child. Does he have a name?" asked Guhan, after teasing his own flesh and blood for a while holding Long Xiaoya in his arms and changing positions. "Not yet. This is Master's flesh and blood. I dare not name him, said Long Xiaoya with her head down. Nonsense, you are the child's mother, and you have been pregnant with him for 20 years. Of course, you have the right to name him. How about this, you decide the child's name, said Guhan in an irrefutable manner. Then can I call him Jiyu Fan? Long Xiaoya said hesitantly, I hope that this child can live an ordinary life. Oh. Guhan looked at Long Xiaoya with some surprise. Guhan was also familiar with Long Xiaoya's nature, and he was puzzled by Long Xiaoya's name. Don't you like a vigorous life the most? Do you want to be a vigorous woman? After all, 20 years. People will change. I don't want to think about anything else anymore. I just want to be able to protect my child and live the rest of my life normally, Long Xiaoya said from the bottom of her heart. Jiyu Fan. Jiyu Han looked at the child who was still giggling, carried Long Xiaoya to another place, and then sighed. Let's call him Jiyu Fan. But I'm afraid this child won't be able to spend the rest of his life in an ordinary way. After all, he's my son. Jiyu Han's eyes widened in shock. What is Hongjun Jendi doing? Why is he chatting with a woman? Everyone watched as Hongjun stood up from the ground with a newborn child in his arms. He was chatting with the child's mother while casually dodging Pangu's axe. Everyone was completely confused. They couldn't understand why the situation had suddenly changed 180 degrees. It was as if it had become a romantic drama. The great Jendi was in a life-or-death situation, and in the middle of his final battle with the big boss, he actually started to talk with a woman. No matter how they looked at it, this was the standard plot of a romantic drama. Of course, there were some who looked at Liuonian Ling with a strange gaze. Everyone knew that Liuonian Jendi's favorite man was the sword immortal Hongjun who had disappeared for 20 years. The current Hongjun Jendi. And in these 20 years, Liuonian Jendi had continuously protected Hongjun Jendi. Everyone treated Liuonian Jendi as Hongjun Jendi's wife, even though the two of them had never had an official relationship. Now that Guhan was suddenly being affectionate with this pregnant woman, wouldn't Frost Jendi explode with anger? Unexpectedly, although Frost Jendi's face was a bit sour, her emotions were very stable. She didn't look angry at all. Instead, it felt as if she had let out a long sigh. This made everyone feel very strange. Don't make wild guesses. I know this pregnant woman. She's Hongjun Jendi's personal maid. Of course, there were also people who knew the truth. After all, Long Xiaoya had a bit of a reputation in Yuzhang City. There were quite a few people who knew that she was Guhan's personal maid. So she's his personal maid. Everyone revealed an expression of understanding. But soon after, they said with a bit of disgust, but this personal maid is really annoying. She actually dared to betray her master and have a child with another man. This Hongjun Jendi is a bit too magnanimous. He wore such a big green hat on his head and he didn't even have the slightest reaction. If it were me, I would have thrown this damned woman under Pangu's axe and killed this shameless bitch, one of the swordsmen angrily said. He felt as if he had been made a green hat. What do you know? The insider looked at the swordsman with disdain. This child was planted before Hongjun Jendi disappeared. This personal maid has already been pregnant for 20 years. It's a super strange story in Yuzhang City. We never understood why this child refused to come out no matter what. But now we finally understand. This child was waiting for its father to be born, the insider sighed. Long Xiaoya's story quickly spread among all humans. Long Xiaoya instantly became a legendary figure that everyone knew. Master, let's leave this place. It's not good to keep hiding like this. Every 10 seconds, Long Xiaoya was hugged by Guhan and dodged Pangu's axe. She was probably very worried as she spoke. It's okay. This Pangu is just a fake. It's not a powerful thing. As long as you can see through his axe, it's just a useless fool. Guhan looked at Pangu disdainfully and said. Then he touched his son's forehead and sighed. But it's all thanks to this child. If it weren't for this child crying, I might have died. It's my son who saved me. Jiyu Han lifted Jiyu Fan, who was in his arms, high up, just like the classic action in the anime The Lion King. Coincidentally, the moment Jiyu Fan was lifted up, A golden parabola shot out from Ji Yufan's little bird and hit his father's face. Ah! Long Xiaoya was shocked by this sudden change, while Guhan laughed. At the moment when his face was hit, Guhan felt that he had really become a father. It's time to solve this problem. I'll leave the child to you. Guhan put Ji Yufan back into Long Xiaoya's hands, then he pulled in the void. Lu Shihua, who still had a few tears on his face, walked out of the void. Just now, because Lu Shihua rashly rushed out of the void to save him and died under the attack of Pangu's axe, Guhan directly imprisoned Lu Shihua in the void. It was only at this moment that Lu Shihua was released. Judging from Lu Shihua's tear-stained face, Lu Shihua must have shed a lot of tears just now. Guhan's decision to imprison Lu Shihua was extremely correct. Good disciple, master's son, and Xiao Wei are in your hands. You have to protect the two of them, understand? Ji Yuhan said to Long Xiaoya. Yes. As long as disciple is alive, master and master's wife will be safe, Lu Shihua said solemnly. Okay. Guhan nodded, then hesitated for a while and said, don't call her master's wife, just call her Miss Xiao Wei. Ah! Lu Shihua looked at Ji Yuhan in surprise, and Long Xiaoya lowered her head as if she had accepted her fate. Chapter 1462. Now, it's time to take care of you, you stupid thing. After sending Long Xiaoya and Ji Yufan away, Guhan coldly looked at Pan Jiyu, who was standing in front of him. If he couldn't free himself from Pan Gu's axe, he would lose for sure. However, once he freed himself from Pan Gu's axe, it would be time for this stupid thing to die. Sometimes, victory or defeat, life or death, could be decided by a single thought. Pan Gu's attack was still a simple axe move. Once again, Guhan nimbly dodged it. Next, both the heavenly sword and the Duyu sword appeared in Guhan's hands. Guhan flew directly to Pan Gu's face and pierced the pair of swords into the spot between Pan Gu's eyebrows. Clang. Following that, Guhan's swords were knocked away. Oh, looks like I was wrong. Other than this axe, there's something else that's hard enough. After all, this body is indeed Pan Gu's body. Seeing that the two sword ladies couldn't pierce into Pan Gu's body, Ji Yuhan sighed. Why don't I try using two swords? Guhan took back the heavenly sword and the Duyu sword, then pulled out the immortal killing sword and the immortal exterminating sword, piercing the spot between Pan Gu's eyebrows. However, even the legendary 4 immortal killing swords were tightly clamped by Pan Gu's muscles, and even pulling them out took Guhan a great deal of effort. Damn it! This Pan Jiyu is too hard. Hongjun Jendi can't hurt Pan Jiyu at all. Seeing this, the group of sword-bearers said worriedly. If even Hongjun Sword Emperor's terrifying attack couldn't harm Pangu's body, let alone ordinary sword-bearers like them, then Pangu was truly invincible. Humans would be shrouded in Pangu's shadow for the rest of their lives. Indeed hard. This is Pangu's body. Seeing that his pair of swords failed to pierce into Pangu's body, Guhan didn't panic at all. Instead, he even showed a satisfied smile. Meanwhile, he reached out a hand and gently stroked Pangu's body, as if he was stroking a sports car that could drive any man crazy. What is Hongjun Jendi doing? Seeing Guhan's reaction, everyone was dumbfounded. They couldn't understand what Guhan was doing at all. Disperse. Suddenly, Guhan flicked the scabbard on his body and 12 long swords flew out of Guhan's scabbard. Finally, they stopped at 12 different positions. If one were to look carefully, they would discover that the 12 swords were positioned exactly where the 12 Du Tian Zhu Wu had been. In the next second, the 12 swords began to transform. The slender blades gradually transformed into slender, beautiful young ladies. In the end, the 12 young ladies with different looks, temperaments, and figures appeared in front of everyone at the same time. Oh my God! 12 sword ladies. Hongjun Jendi is indeed as the legends say. He is a terrifying Jendi who has 2 sword ladies at the same time. Seeing the appearance of 12 different sword mothers, the sword-bearers sighed in their hearts. At the same time, from the number of 12, they realized that Ji Yuhan had to have 2 Emperor Sword-level sword mothers at the same time. What a terrifying fellow. He could actually have 2 Emperor Sword-level sword mothers at the same time. No wonder he was so terrifyingly powerful. Hey, do you guys know these sword ladies? Tell me, who are the 12 sword ladies of Hongjunjendi? Immediately, a curious sword-bearer asked the person next to him. I have the information here. Immediately, a sword-bearer took out his personal terminal and projected a picture. He pointed at the 12 different sword ladies in the air and explained, look at the shortest lowly sword lady wearing a crocodile costume. She is Hongjunjendi's first sword lady. She is also an ancient sword lady, Qingpin sword. She is currently the number 1 sword lady in the ancient sword rank. Hearing this, everyone nodded. So it was the number 1 sword lady in the ancient sword rank. No wonder she was so powerful. Only the strong could have such a powerful sword lady. However, these people did not know that Qingpin sword's ranking had risen later on. When Qingpin sword first appeared, it was actually the last among all the sword ladies in the ancient sword rank. That one whose expression is as calm as water and who wears the simplest clothes is the passing water sword of the ancient sword grade. I heard that it's a sword maiden forged by Hongjun Sword Emperor himself. Although it doesn't have a ranking, it's definitely one of the best of the ancient sword grade. Following this person's continuous introduction, everyone finally had a better understanding of the 12 sword ladies in the air. However, this person only collected some superficial information, so everyone only had a limited understanding. As for the rest of the story, they did not know. After listening to the introduction, everyone could not help but be curious. If they had not seen wrongly, in such an intense battle, Ji Han had not used his 2 emperor-level sword ladies. Instead, he had only used 2 treasure-level sword ladies. This made everyone feel strange. Why didn't Ji Han use the Arch sword and only use the treasured sword grade sword lady? Of course, everyone was even more curious. What was Guhan trying to do by releasing his 12 sword ladies? Everyone, I'm going to rest. I'll leave the rest to you. After releasing his 12 sword ladies, Guhan seemed to let out a long sigh of relief. Then, he smiled and said to the 12 sword ladies, Aya, after holding it in for so long, we're finally out. I say, Guhan, you should have released us long ago. Then, you would have ended the battle long ago. We were almost suffocated in the scabbard. Celestial Extinguishing Sword said with a smile. That's right, Guhan is the most annoying. Staying in the scabbard is not fun at all. Qingpin also pouted. That's enough, you've appeared in front of everyone countless times. This is the first time you've appeared in front of everyone. Ji Han, just keep them in your scabbards. If you let me out earlier, I'll at least have a chance to appear in front of everyone. A crimson sword maiden, who looked like a phoenix, said loudly with dissatisfaction. This sword lady's figure was the tallest among all the sword ladies. She was even a head taller than Guhan. She was at least 1.9 meters tall. Moreover, her figure was also the hottest among all the sword ladies. She had a curvaceous figure, a perfect combination of the devil and the flesh. The most unique thing about this sword maiden was probably her clothes. Her fiery red clothes were filled with drawings of mountains, rivers, grains, heaven and earth, astronomy and geography, and a series of prehistoric images. I believe that everyone has already guessed that this sword maiden is the Shenyuan sword, the ancestral sword of the human race. She has finally completed the synchronization with the solid cold and appeared in front of everyone. Is this person Pangu? He's completely different from what I imagined. The celestial extinguishing sword's frequency was completely different from the noisy Shenyuan swords. She stared deeply at Pangu, who was surrounded by them. Her eyes were filled with reverence and doubt as she muttered to herself. That's right. Is the great god Pangu this stupid thing that only knows how to hack? If the great god Pangu really looked like this, the world would still be a chaotic egg. The celestial extinguishing sword also looked at Pangu with a complicated expression. Not only the celestial extinguishing sword and the celestial slaying sword, but the celestial captivating sword and the celestial slaughtering sword also looked at the stupid Pangu with confusion and doubt. In fact, the 4 celestial slaying swords had very complicated feelings for Pangu. When the 4 celestial slaying swords appeared, Pangu had already split the world apart and used his life and flesh to forge the entire world. Therefore, The 4 celestial slaying swords worshipped Pangu from the bottom of their hearts. In their hearts, Pangu was like a totem and a belief. However, looking at the stupid Pangu in front of them who only knew how to hack, this feeling made the 4 celestial slaying swords very unhappy. It was as if the idol in their hearts had been destroyed in an instant. Don't be stupid, okay? The real Pangu is already dead. This is just a stupid thing formed by the gathering of 12 pieces of flesh and blood he left behind. It is not the real Pangu at all. While dodging Pangu's attack, Guhan said helplessly to his sword ladies, "You have all memorized the 12 divine beings killing formation. Let's test it out now. I almost risked my life to help you fight for this opportunity. Okay, we got it." Shenyuan's sword waved his hand and shouted to all the sword ladies, "Sisters, let this stupid thing see our 12 divine beings killing formation." 12 divine beings killing formation? Hearing this name, all the sword bearers were stunned and asked themselves instinctively, what does Hongjun Jendi want to do? However, these sword bearers did not need to think for too long. As soon as Shenyuan's sword's voice fell, his body changed back to the shape of a sword in an instant. The other sword ladies looked at each other and also changed back to the shape of a sword. Then, just like the reappearance of the 12 divine beings killing formation, 12 strands of sword elements shot out from the tips of the 12 sword ladies and collided in the air. Then, these sword elements gathered together, and a huge sword the size of Pangu was slowly formed. Oh my god! My Kunzu! 12 sword ladies, actually merge. This time, everyone, including Liunian Ling, opened their mouths wide and could not close them. No one had ever thought that the sword ladies could actually merge together, let alone 12 sword ladies at the same time. This huge sword was so simple and unadorned. There were no patterns on it, not even a hilt. Apart from its huge size, there was nothing special about it. It looked like a sword that could be bought for 10 yuan on the roadside. But at the same time, it had abandoned all decorations and complicated designs, and returned to its original state, the purest and most pure sword. This was the original form of a sword. Guhan gently pushed forward with his fingertips, and the huge sword directly slashed towards Pangu's body. With this slash, heaven and earth bloomed like a dream. Chapter 1463. Oh my god, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. After the strike, the Shenyuan sword let out a strange cry and fell from the sky, along with the other sword ladies. It seemed that the so-called 12 heavenly cycle sword ladies formation could only last for one strike. After that, they all disbanded. Who's your mother? She goes around calling her mother. The celestial extinguishing sword, who had also fallen, couldn't help but complain. If I had to analyze a mother, it would be Pangu. The Shenyuan sword looked up at Pangu, who was still standing in the same spot behind her. She couldn't help but stick out her tongue and say, "Damn it, I actually killed my mother. How disgraceful. Are you sure this imposter is dead?" The Heaven Reliant sword asked the Shenyuan sword as she supported her aching waist. "Of course, all 12 of us are together. There's no way this imposter wouldn't be dead," the Shenyuan sword said with a pout. As if to prove what the Shenyuan sword had just said, the towering Pangu behind them instantly collapsed. It turned back into 12 bodies and fell to the ground like the sword ladies. This time, it was naturally the 12 Zhu Wus that fell. However, what was strange was that after the 12 Zhu Wus split up, they didn't turn back into their original giant forms. Instead, they became the size of a normal person and fell to the ground. Coincidentally, the 12 Zhu Wus landed right next to the sword ladies. The 24 of them were mixed together in a mess. We lost, our Pangu bodies, actually lost. The 12 Zhu Wus didn't die, but they didn't look too good. Some of the Zhu Wus struggled to stand up, but they couldn't. They could only lie down and look at the sky. A few drops of tears fell from the corners of their eyes. The 12 Zhu Wus actually cried. This was something that had never happened in tens of millions of years. Even at the end of the Great Shamanyara War, the 12 Zhu Wus hadn't shed a single tear. But now, the 12th Zhu Wu was crying. He was very sad because he was beaten by Guhan. Pin looked at the 12 Zhu who were crying beside him and said, "Useless fellas, they're actually crying. How shameless. What do you know? Our Pangu real body was defeated. The invincible ancestor Pangu was defeated. Our belief and the meaning of our existence is gone," Grand Wizard Shen Ming said with tears streaming down his face. The Wu people always considered themselves as descendants of Pan Jiyu, and viewed Pan Jiyu as their supreme ancestor. Now that their ancestor was defeated, the 12 Zhu surely could no longer control their emotions. "Haven't you lost before? Didn't your Pangu real body lose to the demon race during the Great Magi Demon War?" Shen Yuan's sword said disdainfully. "It was different back then." Dejiang propped half of his body up from the ground and said, "Back then, the two idiots, Zhurong and Gonggong, were tricked by the demon race and fought a great battle. Even half of Zhu Wu's blood bead was destroyed. After that, the demon race launched a surprise attack on us. Although we managed to form the Pangu real body, because of Zhurong and Gonggong, the Pangu real body wasn't complete. It didn't even have half of its current strength. So, the one who lost wasn't Pan Jiyu, but us 12 Zhu Wu. How can it be the same? Haha. That means the 12 of us are even more awesome than the demon race's heavenly court back then," Shen Yuan's sword said proudly. "Who are you? How can you form the same team as us? And how can you easily break our Pangu real body? Who are you?" Gomang asked the sword maidens while panting heavily. "Of course we are sword maidens. Don't you know who we are after fighting us for so long?" Heavenly Sword rolled his eyes at the 12 Zhu Wu. "Yes. You are sword maidens. We were defeated by sword maidens." Gomang looked up into the sky and sighed. Then, he looked at the 12 sword maidens around him and could not help but say, "Speaking of which, it's strange. What kind of existences are you sword maidens? Why are there things like sword maidens in this world?" With Gomang's words, the sword maidens were at a loss. That's right. Why did sword maidens exist in this world? They couldn't figure it out either. Their existence is reasonable. If you want to doubt the existence of sword maidens, then you should first question your own existence. Why did you come to our world? At that moment, Guhan floated down from the sky and landed beside the group. He looked at the 12 Zhu Wu who were unable to get up on the ground. This was the first time Guhan was looking at these once lawless existences that ruled over the entire Earth from a level perspective. "You win. We are defeated." Upon seeing Guhan appear, Zhu Wu Dejiang said directly. As for the other Zhu Wu, they lowered their noble heads, acknowledging their defeat at the hands of a human like Guhan. "Is that so? Since you've already admitted defeat, I can send you on your way. Pay the price for your crimes." Guhan beckoned with his hand. Pin, who had been playing dead on the ground, instantly flew into Guhan's hand and transformed back into a sword maiden. The other sword maidens also transformed back into sword maidens and floated beside Guhan. Their sharp blades shimmered with blinding light. This was also the last light the 12 Zhu Wu saw. "We have lost. We deserve to die." Dejiang nodded, seeming to accept his own death very much. He didn't have the slightest fear or resistance. He just asked Jiyu Han with a faint look of doubt on his face. "How did you dodge the attack of the real body of Pangu? How did you break through the defense of the real body of Pangu? I wonder if you can answer our questions before you die." Zhu Wu Dejiang looked at Guhan and asked very seriously, "What if I don't answer you? What will you do?" Guhan asked back. "We will die with everlasting regret," Dejiang said with certainty. So even Zhu Wu knows how to make cold jokes. Guhan couldn't help but laugh. "The reason why you Pangu can make me lose all ability to dodge is because the Pangu you created has mastered all the rules in the world. At the same time, you have controlled all the rules in the world and shrunk them to a point. That's why I can't dodge and can only let your Pangu attack me, right?" "Yes." Dejiang nodded, acknowledging Guhan's words. Then he said, "But how did you break through all the rules in the world? As far as I know, it's only possible to not be bound by all the rules in the world unless you reach the realm of the sage and transcend the world. But I can see that you are still a human. You haven't reached the realm of the sage and you haven't transcended the world. You can't break through the shackles of Pangu. I don't understand this, so I die with everlasting regret. Fine, I'll show you for Pangu's sake. After thinking for a while, Guhan suddenly reached out his right hand to Dejiang and opened his entire right palm. This is. Dejiang was stunned when he saw what was in Guhan's right hand. He clearly saw a small sword blossoming in Guhan's hand. It looked no different from an ordinary sword. Dejiang could break countless swords like this with one breath. The only surprising thing was that the sword seemed to grow out of Jiyu Han's palm. It wasn't just being held in Jiyu Han's hand. You mean, this is the sword that defeated us? Defeated Pangu? Dejiang looked at the sword and said in a daze, "What sword is this? Is it the legendary 4 immortal killing swords?" No. Just the 4 immortal killing swords can't break the real body of Pangu. Get this straight. That sword isn't the 4 immortal killing swords. The real 4 immortal killing swords are here. Look carefully. Immortal extinguishing sword in sword form suddenly said discontentedly. Pangu above, this is the real immortal extinguishing sword. Emperor Jiang looked up and was shocked to find that the sword that had just spoken was indeed the real 4 fairy killing swords. Others might not recognize the 4 fairy killing swords, but as the 12 ancestors of sorcery from the untainted land, how could they not recognize the sword that originated from Pangu's axe? Soon, Dejiang found that not only the immortal extinguishing sword, but the other 3 immortal killing swords, immortal trapping sword, and immortal slaughtering sword were also floating beside Guhan. Guhan, this human, had gathered all the 4 immortal killing sword. As you can see, the sword in my hand isn't the 4 immortal killing sword. Guhan said with a smile, and Dejiang's gaze returned to the small sword in Guhan's hand. After a closer look, Dejiang found that this small sword was the one that had cut Pangu's body in half. But that huge sword had shrunk to an extremely small size, floating in Guhan's hand. If this sword isn't the 4 immortal killing swords, then what is it? Is there a sword stronger than the 4 immortal killing swords in this world? Dejiang asked in confusion. I think you know very well that there's no sword stronger than the 4 immortal killing swords in this world. Guhan shook his head and sighed. To be honest, in terms of pure strength, this sword isn't even as strong as the plastic sword I bought for 10 yuan by the roadside. Then why? You said it before, as long as I'm still in this world, I'll be bound by the rules of the world, and I won't be able to escape Pangu's axe. But this sword is different, it doesn't come from this world. At this point, Guhan couldn't help smiling proudly. This is my sword, the first sword that belongs to my world. Chapter 1464. Your sword. The first sword in your world. Ancestral sorcerer Emperor Jiang, along with the other 11 ancestral sorcerers, couldn't help but tremble. Then, he looked at Jiyu Han in a daze. Could it be that you've already reached that step? Don't tell me you can already create your own world. You can say yes, but you can also say no, or just a small step. Guhan shook his head slightly and said, I've only created a sword, nothing else. I'm still far from that realm. That's already very impressive. Zhu Wu Dejiang nodded and said with an extremely admiring expression, this is a realm that even sages pursue. You're not a sage yet, but you've taken a step further than sages in this world. You may become the new Pangu of the world in the future. How can there be such a terrifying human like you in this world? It's not embarrassing for us, the 12 Zhu Wus, to be defeated by you. Actually, I have to thank you all. Guhan smiled and said, actually, before the battle with you all, I didn't even know what my own world was. Thanks to the battle with you all, I finally saw where my future path is. Is that so? The 12 Zhu Wu's smile became even more bitter. It felt like he had sent him down a brand new path. Oh yes, since you all have become the native Zhu Wus of this world, then lend me your Zhu Wu's blood bead. Guhan changed the topic and said, You want our Zhu Wu's blood beads? The 12 Zhu Wus were shocked again and then looked at Guhan with some doubt and asked, Aren't you afraid that you'll be reborn in our body like that idiot Yingzheng? If you have the ability, then I welcome you to be reborn. Guhan smiled and the 12 swords floating around him displayed 12 sword chi at the same time. The 12 Zuwu's bodies were instantly torn into pieces, leaving only 12 Zuwu's blood beads floating around Guhan. Return. With a shake of the sword energy in Ji Yuhan's hand, the 12 ancestral witches' blood beads were all put into Ji Yuhan's dimensional pocket. At the same time, the people in the void felt that the seal on the void had disappeared without a trace. Then the 12 void gates reopened. The humans who had been hiding in the void for 4 to 5 hours could finally walk out of the world of the void and once again stand on the ground of Yuzhang City. Although Yuzhang City had completely disappeared, leaving behind only a sand dune pressed down by the rules. Everything in Yuzhang City, be it steel, plastic, houses, cars, flesh, or plants, had all been crushed into sand by the extreme rules. Everything in Yuzhang City had disappeared. Master. In the next moment, Lu Shihua appeared beside Guhan with Long Xiaoya and Ji Yufan. Guhan's body fell back just in time, and Lu Shihua caught him in time, preventing him from falling to the ground. Master. Seeing Guhan's incomparably weak appearance, Lu Shihua could not help but cry. Silly child. What's there to cry about? Master is tired. Let me sleep. Guhan muttered weakly, then directly closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep, completely handing over his body to Lu Shihua. It must be known that Guhan's behavior was a little too bold. It must be known that Guhan had just killed Lu Shihua's younger brother, so he was not afraid that Lu Shihua would kill him to avenge his brother. When Guhan woke up from his coma, it was said that it was already 3 days later. If Liuyan Ling had not poured the remaining soul moon into Guhan's mouth after discovering that his soul had been greatly depleted, it was estimated that Guhan would have slept for another half a month or so. During the days that I was asleep, the situation was normal, right? No Yuan Ku came to stir up trouble, right? Guhan touched his slightly weak forehead and asked Liuyan Ling, who was beside him. There were. But they were all Yuan Ku who did not have eyes, and did not even have basic intelligence. They were easily dealt with by the other sword-bearers, and I did not even have the chance to attack. Liuyan Ling replied with a sigh. As for those powerful Yuan Ku, the news of you killing the 12 Zuwu and even the real body of Pangu by yourself has already spread throughout the world. It is said that the people in the heavenly court were so frightened that they called back all their Yuan Ku outside, and then tightly shut the gates of the heavenly court. They do not even dare to step out, let alone cause trouble for us. That's good. Hearing Liuyan Ling's words, Guhan also heaved a sigh of relief. Actually, these 3 days are the time when I am the weakest. If they come to cause trouble for me at this time, I might really die in their hands. Don't worry, as long as I am still alive, you will not die. Liuyan Ling inadvertently said something that touched Guhan greatly. What about Yuzhang City? What's the situation there? Guhan asked again. Not good. It's terrible. Liuyan Ling shrugged and said, because of the battle between you and the 12 Zuwu, the distorted rules have turned the entire Yuzhang City into ruins and sand dunes. The 400 million people do not even have a decent tool in their hands. It is almost like they have returned to the primitive era. If it were not for the food stored in our dimensional pockets, people would have starved to death. Then, is there any hope for Yuzhang City to recover? Guhan asked again. The only hope is Yuzhang City's super-dimensional wall system. Because it is buried deep underground, it did not suffer much from the distortion of the rules. After digging it up and repairing it, it should be able to continue to be used. But if Yuzhang City wants to be rebuilt, it will take at least 10 years. All the modern equipment has been destroyed. If Yuzhang City wants to be rebuilt now, I am afraid we can only rely on digging shovel by shovel. Liuyan Ling replied. Sigh. It was me who harmed Yuzhang City. This city left behind by Yi Qingping. I didn't expect it to be destroyed in my hands. Guhan sighed deeply. As Guhan's mother, Yuzhang City was definitely the most important existence in Guhan's life. It was the place that Guhan always remembered to come out of the seamless corridor to protect. The dramatic result was that Yuzhang City was destroyed in the battle between Guhan and the 12 Zuwu. In fact, at the moment the battle began, Guhan had already expected such a result, but there was no other way. Since the battlefield was here, Yuzhang City was doomed. This is not a place to stay for long. Go to Longsha Jendi immediately and ask him to arrange for everyone to be transferred to Yangjing City immediately. I have been to Yangjing City before and found that most of the city is still in good condition. About 80% of the buildings and equipment are still there. As long as the super-dimensional wall system is repaired, Yangjing City should be able to return to its normal state in a month or two, and the lives of the 400 million people will be guaranteed. Guhan suggested to Liuyan Ling, I know, you have so many things to worry about. You have already become like this, but you still care about these things. Liuyan Ling knocked on Guhan's head. You don't need to tell us about this, we all know. Lu Shihua has already taken 10,000 swordbearers to clean up Yangjing City. While repairing the super-dimensional wall system, they will also clean up the Yuan Ku who entered Yangjing City. As for us, we will migrate the remaining humans to Yangjing City, but the speed will probably be very slow. Apart from the super hovercraft in the swordbearer's dimensional pocket, we have almost lost all means of transportation. It is estimated that it will take at least 3 months for all the survivors to reach Yangjing City. I am afraid it will be another bloody day on the way. 10,000 swordbearers are enough to clean up Yangjing City. It is obvious that the migrating humans here need more protection. Although Yangjing City does need an Emperor Sword-level swordbearer to hold the line, using Lu Shihua is a bit too wasteful. Let Longsha Jendi be in charge of the migration and restoration of Yangjing City, and let Lu Shihua protect this place. Guhan immediately said, moreover, in Yangjing City, he can lie down and rest. There is no need for continuous action, which is more conducive to the recovery of Longsha Jendi's body. Hearing Guhan's words, Liuyan Ling's face immediately sank. Her lips moved up and down for a while, but she finally sighed and said, His Majesty Longsha Jendi has already soared to heaven. Even if you want him to rest again, you have no chance. Guhan was also silent. Although he had a premonition that Longsha Jendi might not live for long, he did not expect that when he opened his eyes, Longsha Jendi had already soared to heaven. How did Longsha Jendi leave? When did he leave? Guhan asked with a pained expression. You can rest assured that he was very happy when he left. Liuyan Ling said faintly, he watched you defeat 12 Zhu Wu with his own eyes, saw humans return to reality, and then soared to heaven with a smile on his face. When he left, he did not have any regrets. That's good too. Guhan nodded. To be able to leave without any regrets was in itself a great fortune. Sigh, the old generation of Emperor Sword-level swordbearers have already left. Fortunately, the new generation of Emperor Sword-level swordbearers has been born. With you and Shi Hua here, humans still have a future, Liuyan Ling said faintly. Are you missing a person? Guhan looked at Liuyan Ling with some surprise. Are you talking about me? Liuyan Ling looked down at her old hands. I am already a person with half my body buried in the ground. Maybe tomorrow I will soar to heaven with His Majesty Longsha Jendi. What does this future have to do with me? No. Have you forgotten? I've said it before, I can return your youth to you. Guhan smiled slightly, and then once again spread out his right hand. The small sword that grew in Guhan's hand swayed in the wind like a tenacious weed. Chapter 1465. Go. Guhan's fingertips moved slightly, and the small sword was sent into Liuyan Ling's body. The moment the small sword entered Liuyan Ling's body, her whole body stiffened, and she collapsed into Guhan's arms. Guhan hugged Liuyan Ling's body, and he fell asleep again. Where am I? My body is so comfortable. After wandering for a while, Liuyan Ling slowly woke up, and the unprecedented feeling brought by her body was so wonderful that Liuyan Ling didn't want to open her eyes. This feeling was like soaking in a spring with a suitable temperature. It was so wonderful that she didn't want to wake up. But in the end, Liuyan Ling still woke up, because Liuyan Ling wasn't a woman who liked to escape reality in her sleep. When Liuyan Ling woke up, she found herself lying in Guhan's arms, and Guhan was still sleeping soundly. Her face instantly turned red, like a bride who had just gotten married. But soon, Liuyan Ling put away all these shyness, and at the same time, warned herself in her heart, Liuyan Ling, what are you thinking? You're already an old woman now, and not only have you lost the ability to give birth, But you're also a person who's about to die. And Jiyu Han is in the prime of his youth. Why do you still want to interfere? Are you worthy of Guhan? After such a warning, Liuyan Ling's original cheerful mood quickly disappeared, and it was replaced by an expression of old age, as if she had seen through everything in the world. Oh no. I've actually slept for a day and a night, and I don't know what the situation is like outside. Liuyan Ling looked at her personal terminal, and found that it was already a day later. Thinking about how there were still so many things to deal with in the process of the transfer, she immediately walked out of the tent where Guhan temporarily lived. Seeing that one of her subordinates who was in charge of the transfer happened to appear near the tent, she immediately raised her head and called out to him, and asked a little hurriedly, "How's the situation? Is everything going well? Did any accidents happen? Were there any ungrateful Yuenko who attacked us?" To Liuyan Ling's great surprise, when this subordinate turned around and saw her, he was completely stunned, and stayed in the same place like a wooden man. Liuyan Ling asked several questions, but never got an answer, as if he had lost the ability to answer. "What are you doing? Are there flowers on my face? Answer my questions," Liuyan Ling said a little impatiently. The subordinate finally recovered from his shock, and pointed at Liuyan Ling's face, and said with a trembling body, "Your Majesty Liuyan Ling, your face, your face. What's wrong with my face? I know that my face is an old woman's face. You don't need to be so shocked, aren't you tired of looking at it?" Liuyan Ling touched the most painful part of her heart, and angrily scolded the subordinate. "No. I didn't mean it like that. Your Majesty, your face. Your Majesty, you should look in the mirror yourself. You can change back. I'm really too happy. I'm too happy." The subordinate had already reached the point where he couldn't speak coherently, and tears began to flow from the corners of his eyes. Could it be? Liuyan Ling remembered what Guhan had done to her before she fell asleep, and an unbelievable thought began to form in her mind. However, there was no mirror in Liuyan Ling's dimensional pocket, because ever since Liuyan Ling had grown old, Liuyan Ling had thrown away all the mirrors on her. "Point your gadget at me. Take a picture of me. Quick." In a moment of desperation, Liuyan Ling quickly thought of a solution, and immediately ordered her subordinate to take a picture of her. The subordinate's reaction was also very fast, and very quickly, the picture was taken. When Fleeting Maple saw the familiar face in his subordinate's gadget, 2 drops of tears silently flowed from the corners of Liuyan Ling's eyes. "This is my face. Is this really my face? You're not lying to me with my old photos, are you?" Fleeting Time Rin touched his own face in disbelief when he saw himself in the photo. Through her hands, Liuyan Ling could clearly feel that her old and loose skin was no longer there. What replaced it was a smooth face that was filled with collagen. How was this an old face? It was the face of an 18-year-old. No, a 16-year-old girl. Fleeting Time's Rin took a closer look at the picture, and realized that not only had she regained her youth, but she had even regained her youthfulness. She had regained the appearance of a 16-year-old girl, just like herself when she was 16. Liuyan Ling's screams attracted the attention of the people around her. When they looked at her, they were all in a daze. Some of them were like the subordinate from before, and some of them even shed tears of excitement. After all, humans were grateful animals. Everyone knew what Liuyan Ling had sacrificed for humanity, and when they saw Liuyan Ling's old appearance, they felt sorry for Liuyan Ling. Some of them even prayed in their hearts, willing to exchange their youth for Liuyan Ling's youth. However, everyone knew in their hearts that this was no ordinary aging. It was the aging of one's body being deprived of vitality. Such aging could not be recovered by medical pods. It was just like how medical pods could revive a person who only had a head left, but could not revive a person who had a complete body but had reached the end of his lifespan. So when they saw that Liuyan Ling had regained her youth, they were shocked, and they all shed tears of joy. They were moved by the fact that Liuyan Ling had regained her youth. Seeing the reactions of the people around her, and then looking at her new smooth arms and body, Liuyan Ling could finally confirm that she had regained her youth. "Congratulations, Your Majesty Jendi." One of the sword-bearers suddenly began to clap, and the other sword-bearers followed suit. Very quickly, the entire camp was filled with applause. Thank you everyone. Thank you everyone. Liuyan Ling thanked the people who were clapping for her, and then began to escape from the crowd. She ran towards the few buildings in the camp. Because Yuzhang City had already been turned into a sand dune, it was not suitable for a camp to be set up, so the camp was set up in a place outside of Yuzhang City. And because all of the construction equipment had been destroyed, most of the buildings here were temporary tents. There were only a few wooden houses. These wooden houses were used as the most important administrative and medical department of Yuzhang City. Apart from the largest wooden house that was the temporary camp's administrative department, the rest of the wooden houses were the camp's hospital. However, because all of the medical equipment was gone, the hospital was filled with medical pods. These medical pods were all donated by the sword bearers themselves, and were used to save the survivors who were injured in battle. And the sword bearers who donated these medical pods were faced with a situation where they would not be able to receive effective medical treatment if they met with Yuan Ku. However, this was not a big problem, because the humans' activities were limited to the temporary camp. At any time, other sword bearers could go and help. As long as they did not stray too far away from the camp, there should not be any life-threatening danger. And as one of the leaders of the human race, Liuyan Ling naturally had to set an example. She also donated her own immortal-ranked medical pod, and placed it in one of the wooden houses. After entering the wooden house, Liuyan Ling immediately found her own medical pod. Fortunately, the medical pod was still empty, and no one was inside. Just as she was about to lie down, a stern voice suddenly called out to Liuyan Ling, "What are you doing? Do you have an appointment? If you don't have an appointment, you are not allowed to enter, otherwise I will call the police," a doctor said dutifully. Liuyan Ling turned her head to look at the doctor, and when she saw Liuyan Ling's face, the doctor was clearly shocked. He mumbled to himself, "Miss Ling." "No. Your Majesty Liuyan, why are you here? Why are you? That's enough, what's with all this nonsense? I'll go in for a checkup, and you'll watch over me from the outside. Get the medical pod to check my body thoroughly. Especially." Fleeting Time's face flushed, but he insisted, "Especially my fertility. I want to know if I can still." Fleeting Time's face reddened, but he persisted. "Especially my fertility. I want to know if I can still, this. Your Majesty Frost, to be honest. I am only a doctor that was recruited at the last minute. I was only a first-year student in the medical school. I am only responsible for guarding these medical pods. I do not have the ability to operate and use the medical pods. Why don't you wait a moment? I will go find a doctor to help you check," the doctor said with a troubled expression. "Understood. Then hurry up and come back quickly." Liuyan Ling nodded, and then laid down in the medical pod, immediately entering a drowsy state. As if he had been granted amnesty, the doctor ran out of the wooden house. Not long after, he pulled another doctor wearing a white coat and walked in. After seeing who was lying in the medical pod, the doctor's face revealed a strange smile. Then, he operated the medical pod. After carefully checking the data displayed by the medical pod a few times, he forcefully knocked on the medical pod's glass cover and said with a smile, "Wake up, my Miss Ling, are you done checking?" Liuyan Ling woke up from her dreams, but when she looked through the glass cover of the medical pod and saw the smiling doctor outside, her entire body instantly froze. "Song Ifei, why are you here?" Liuyan Ling cried out in shock. Chapter 1466. It's hard for you to still recognize me. I thought that our great Frost Jendi had already forgotten about me, his former friend and love rival. Song Ifei said with a strange smile on his face. These words made Liuyan Ling blush. She couldn't help but say, "How can we be love rivals? Guhan was never mine." If you weren't my love rival, then Guhan would have given you the most precious Genesis sword seed in order to help you recover. Otherwise, with that broken body of yours, you would have died in a few months. You wouldn't even have the appearance of a 16-year-old girl. What a pity. Guhan went through so much trouble and sacrificed his own life just to condense the Genesis sword seed from 12 Zuwu's body. And now he's wasting it on you. Who knows how long Guhan will have to wait for the next time he condenses the Genesis sword seed. Maybe because of you, The entire human race's future is over, Song Yifei said with a cold smile. Song Yifei, explain it to me. What do you mean by that? What Genesis sword seed? What human race's future? Liuyan Ling pushed open the glass cover of the medical bay and jumped out. She looked at Song Yifei anxiously and asked, I'm too lazy to answer that question. You should go ask that idiot Gu Han yourself. Song Yifei shrugged and then added, That's right, as a doctor, I still have to explain your condition. What condition? Liuyan Ling was a little confused. Song Yifei continued, I'm very sorry, your body is very healthy right now. There's not even a single bacterium in your body. Plus, you're full of life and all your functions have returned to normal. If you want, you can have a litter of puppies with Gu Han. Are you satisfied now? What the hell, what litter of puppies? What do you mean have a litter of puppies with Gu Han? You actually called Gu Han a dog. Liuyan Ling's face instantly turned red. When she raised her head to look for Song Yifei, she found that he had already disappeared from the medical bay. There was also a faint feeling of the void in the air. Clearly, Song Yifei had already left through the nether gate. What the hell is this? Liuyan Ling saw that Song Yifei had disappeared and her face was filled with confusion. Then, she suddenly thought of what Song Yifei had said about them being a bunch of puppies. She suddenly became hot again and blushed from head to toe. It was so sweet. Ahem. Liuyan Ling quickly came to her senses. Looking at the doctor who had led Song Yifei into the medical bay, and then watching the confrontation between Liuyan Ling and Song Yifei, she could not help but become gloomy. Then, she scolded him sternly, Come here. Let me ask you, what's wrong with this doctor? How did she become the attending doctor here? Don't you know? How much risk will it cause to the hospital to let an outsider in? Will it cause such a great danger to the patients in the hospital? It's none of my business. I'm just a helper. I don't know anything. Hearing Liuyan Ling's scolding, the unlucky doctor completely panicked and said in a sad voice, When this hospital was first established, Dr. Song Yifei was already here. I was only transferred here to help later. I heard from other seniors that Dr. Song Yifei appeared during the Battle of Zhu Wu 5 days ago. And I heard that Shihua Jendi sent her here personally. He said that her medical skills are superb and can help many people, so, alright, you don't have to say anything more. Since Shihua Jendi sent her here, it's useless for you to refuse. Liuyan Ling sighed and directly left the temporary hospital. Judging from the fact that Song Yifei was sent here by Lu Shihua, it was probably not Lu Shihua who sent Song Yifei here, but Lu Shihua's teacher. When did Gu Han hook up with Song Yifei? Oh. I didn't know that Gu Han came back until 5 days ago when Ying Zheng ascended the throne. But Song Yifei was already here that day. Doesn't this mean that after Gu Han came back, the first person he went to was Song Yifei, not me? Thinking of this, Liuyan Ling's face suddenly darkened. A strong smell of jealousy began to spread in the temporary camp. Come. Open your mouth. Ah. When Liuyan Ling returned to Gu Han's tent, she saw a scene that made Liuyan Ling even angrier. That damned Song Yifei was holding a bowl of porridge and feeding Gu Han mouthful by mouthful. At this time, it seemed that Gu Han had released all of his sword maidens. Most of them were not in the tent, only Qingpin, Duyu, and Chijian were in the tent. What made Liuyan Ling even more surprised was that Chijian's sword, the only legal wife of Gu Han and also the one who was extremely jealous of Song Yifei, looked at Song Yifei's existence calmly, as if it was already used to Song Yifei's existence. Gu Han, you must explain to me clearly what is going on. Today, you must tell me clearly what happened in that seamless corridor, and what happened after you left it. Liuyan Ling said angrily. Sigh. Seeing Liuyan Ling's angry expression, Gu Han could only sigh and say helplessly, My dear Miss Ling, can't you speak to me calmly after I gave you the Genesis sword seed and gave you back your youth? Ah. Thank you. Thank you. Liuyan Ling's expression froze, but she quickly thanked Gu Han sincerely. On this point, Liuyan Ling was indeed very grateful to Gu Han. Otherwise, if she continued to live like this, Liuyan Ling would probably find a place to commit suicide. Fine. I had to tell you sooner or later, so I'll take this opportunity to tell you everything I can. Gu Han looked at Liuyan Ling gently, then patted the bed beside him, and Liuyan Ling walked over obediently. Song Yifei glared at Guhan unhappily, then threw the bowl away and said, "All right, I'm not interested in listening to what I've already heard. You two chat, I'm going to play with Lil Fan. I'll play with your son until he's satisfied today." After saying that, Song Yifei angrily went to play with Jiyu Fan. Jiyu Fan and Long Xiaoya's tent was right next to Guhan's tent, and at this time, Long Xiaoya and Long Xiaoya were wholeheartedly taking care of their poor child. One could imagine how pitiful Song Yifei would look when he angrily played with the poor baby Jiyu Fan. "Tell me. I'm listening," Liuyan Ling said faintly, while Guhan caressed the heads of Qingpin and Duyu, who were also sleeping soundly on the bed, as he began to narrate the story unhurriedly. Of course, he began with the story of what had happened in the seamless corridor. Everyone already knew these stories, so there was no need to repeat them. Of course, Guhan did not tell Liuyan Ling about Yi Qingping and Artoria. He only told her about the strange spacetime setting in the seamless corridor, how he had left the seamless corridor, how he had entered the lost dimensional space, and how he had returned to the whole world through the dimensional rift. "What? You're saying that you're now a Yuan Ku? Your body has been contaminated by filth?" When Guhan said that there was filth in his body, Liuyan Ling was completely shocked. She looked at Guhan in disbelief and said absent-mindedly, "This isn't a good thing. Why would I lie to you? Why would I lie to you?" Guhan sighed and raised his right hand at the same time. If one looked closely, one would notice that Guhan's right hand was trembling slightly, as though he had a mild form of Parkinson's disease. "Did you know?" Guhan looked at his right hand and said, "If it wasn't for my willpower resisting the filth, I would have already slashed your body. No wonder all the Yuan Ku have become the enemies of humanity. The filth's control is simply too strong, so strong that even my willpower can't resist it. Do you know why I had to send all the humans into the Void Gate?" Guhan put down his right hand. "Actually, I lied at that time. I could have moved the battlefield outside of Yuzhang City. But if I didn't find an excuse to send all the humans into the Void Gate, I was afraid that the strong desire to kill humans during the battle would affect my mind at any time. I might even be unable to control myself from attacking humans. This is also why I had to let Lu Shihua enter the void. At the most critical moment, I even had the thought of killing Lu Shihua and Long Xiaoya, as well as my own flesh and blood." Guhan. Hearing Guhan say this, Liuyan Ling's heart was instantly infected with grief. She did not expect that the mighty Ling, the unstoppable Guhan, had to secretly endure the torture of the desire to kill humans. If such a desire to kill could really not be resisted by all the Yuan Ku, then Guhan's willpower was too terrifying. "It's okay. Actually, it's not a big deal." Ji Yuhan smiled. "It's fine as long as I'm not distracted. When I'm not distracted, it's quite easy to suppress the filthy desire to kill. But this is not a long-term solution after all. Guhan, is there really no way to get rid of the filth in your body?" Liuyan Ling asked worriedly. "Of course it's not a long-term solution. If it weren't for Ying Zheng's death, I wouldn't have appeared in Yuzhang City so soon. I originally wanted to go to the Freedom City first and find the mayor of the Freedom City, who is said to have gotten rid of the filth's control with his own strength. I wanted to see if I could find a way to get rid of the filth in my body from his Yuan Ku, who knows filth the best." Guhan said. "Millimeter." Liuyan Ling nodded and rearranged what Guhan had said in her mind. Then, she suddenly thought of something and looked at Guhan strangely again. "According to what you said, you returned to the real world when the 12 Zhu were about to besiege Yuzhang City. That means it's been almost 2 months since then. Where have you been for almost 2 months? Why didn't you appear earlier?" "I had no choice. Song Yifei suddenly appeared in front of me." Guhan smiled bitterly. "And she also told me that Lu Shihua was with her. If I didn't leave with her first, Lu Shihua would definitely die." Chapter 1467. Let's go back in time to 2 months ago, when Ji Yuhan had just returned to his world. After saving the poor siblings, Ji Yuhan escorted them all the way back to Yuzhang City. Yes, that's right, Ji Yuhan had indeed returned to Yuzhang City at that time. At that time, There were still 3 days before the 12 Zhu Wu's siege. At that time, Guhan saw that Yuzhang City was still standing tall and the super-dimensional wall system was at its peak. Guhan let out a long sigh of relief and prepared to bring the siblings into Yuzhang City. In the end, when they approached the gates of Yuzhang City, Guhan's footsteps stopped because Guhan felt a bone-piercing chill from Yuzhang City's super-dimensional wall system. It was a chill that kept people at a distance. It was a chill that told Guhan that Yuzhang City did not welcome Guhan. Of course, Guhan knew why there was such a chill. Now, Guhan was no longer human. His body flowed with filth from another dimension. He was now a Yuan Ku. Naturally, he was rejected by the super-dimensional wall system because the super-dimensional wall system was protecting humans. The super-dimensional wall system was only fulfilling its original duty. Guhan could not even enter Yuzhang City now. This was because if a Yuan Ku wanted to enter Yuzhang City, he would need the cooperation of an Emperor sword wielder or a sword wielder with an Emperor sword. Although Guhan already knew that Liuyan Ling was in Yuzhang City, to be honest, it was still a challenge for Guhan to tell Liuyan Ling that he had become a Yuan Ku. Therefore, Guhan let the siblings return to Yuzhang City on their own. However, they were not allowed to reveal that he had returned to the real world. After that, Guhan was lost in the forest outside Yuzhang City for a long time. When Guhan had almost made up his mind to let Liuyan Ling pick him up, a sudden void fluctuation interrupted Guhan's thoughts. Under normal circumstances, a sword fairy sword wielder could only sense void fluctuations within a radius of 50 kilometers. However, as someone who had mastered void rules, Guhan could sense the void within a radius of 500 kilometers. Therefore, Guhan could easily sense that a fierce battle was going on more than 200 kilometers away from Yuzhang City. At the same time, Guhan also discovered that one side of the battle was a human sword wielder, and the other side was 2 Yuan Ku. Although he could not completely sense the level of these two sides, since they could continuously travel through the void, they were at least at the sword fairy level. Of course, Guhan could not just watch as the human sword fairy sword wielder was attacked by Yuan Ku. Without a word, he rushed over. When Guhan saw the two sides fighting, he could not help but be a little stunned. This was because one side of the battle was actually someone he knew. It was Song Ifei, whom he had not seen for a long time. Ever since he knew that Song Ifei had followed Ming Yuan Zhendi and become Ming Yuan Zhendi's disciple, Guhan had not been in contact with Song Ifei. However, he had never expected that Song Ifei would be attacked by 2 Yuan Ku. There was nothing much to say. Based on their previous friendship, Guhan had to help Song Ifei. At this moment, even though Ji Yu Han did not recognize the Yuenko who was attacking him, judging from their attire, they were all dressed in traditional samurai attire. From the looks of it, they should be the Yuenko from Fusang. Let me help you. Without a word, Guhan directly pulled out his celestial extinguished sword and rushed into the battle. Who is it? The 2 Fusang's Yuan Ku felt a huge pressure the moment Guhan joined the battle. They could not help but take a step back and looked at Guhan in panic. At the same time, Song Ifei also saw the face of this man who suddenly jumped out to help her clearly. Then, the sword lady in her hand lost its balance and fell into the void. At the same time, she said in a trembling voice in disbelief, "Guhan. It's you. You're back. Are you really back? You finally don't want to treat me with that cold face anymore?" Seeing Song Ifei's true feelings, Ji Yu Han's face also showed a smile. He still remembered that when he met Song Ifei last time, she looked at Guhan with a cold face the whole time, as if she did not know Guhan at all. Now, seeing Song Ifei's excited face again, Guhan felt a lot better. His old friend was not a puppet of Ming Yuan Zhendi. She should still have her own feelings, and she was still a human. Guhan? Is his name Guhan or Guhan Sword Immortal? After hearing Guhan's name, the 2 Fusang's Yuan Ku began to talk to each other in confusion. I don't know, in our information, there doesn't seem to be a human sword-bearer named Guhan, one of the Fusang's Yuan Ku said. That's right, I also remember that there is no immortal sword realm sword-bearer named Guhan. Definitely not. Before we came out, we already went through all the human immortal sword realm sword-bearers, and there is definitely no one named Guhan. The other Yuan Ku said. Could it be that this guy has recently become an immortal Sword Realm swordbearer, and was originally a spiritual Sword Realm swordbearer? The previous Yuan Ku guessed, and this guess was also agreed by the other Yuan Ku. They unilaterally thought that Guhan was a spiritual Sword Realm swordbearer who had advanced. It seems that I, Guhan, have not appeared for 20 years, and the Yuan Ku have completely forgotten my name. A cold smile appeared on Guhan's face. In fact, these Yuan Kus could not be blamed. When Guhan was at the peak 20 years ago, the Fusang's Yuan Ku did not have much interaction with humans, and Guhan had never fought with the Fusang's Yuan Ku. Of course, the Fusang's people would not remember Guhan's name. After all, the Yuan Ku's lifespan was too long. If they wanted to remember the names of the immortal Sword Realm swordbearers born in each era, the heads of these Yuan Kus would not be enough. What? 20 years ago. At this time, hearing Guhan mention the time of 20 years ago, a light bulb suddenly flashed in the mind of a certain Yuan Ku. He remembered the scene of the Fusang divine system attacking Yuzhang City 20 years ago, and the scene of the entire Fusang divine system being defeated by Yuzhang City's counterattack. His whole body shivered instantly, and he asked in panic. You are Guhan. Jiyu Xuanyuan's brother. Legend has it that you are a immortal Sword Realm swordbearer who is more powerful than Jiyu Shenyuan, and the swordbearer who killed 200-level Yuan Ku. God had pity on them. These two guys finally remembered the name of Guhan. Chapter 1468. Run. Cunning had been integrated into the character of the Fusang people since ancient times. So when they remembered the existence of Guhan and his former fame, the two of them made the best decision in an instant. That was to run away, desperately run away from Guhan, the further the better. They were not confident that they could be stronger than the two Hung-level Yuan Ku. But how could Jiyu Han let these two fellows escape? Moreover, with Jiyu Han's current strength, it was impossible for these two fellows to escape. There was nothing much to say about the specific process. Anyway, after an easy battle, the two Fusang Yuan Ku were completely controlled by Guhan. Then he dragged them back to his side, looked at them coldly, and said, "Tell me your names and your purpose. Did we answer your question? Will you spare our lives?" The two Fusang Yuan Ku looked at Guhan with eager eyes and asked, "I can spare your lives." Guhan smiled slightly. "But you can't stay in this world anymore. I will send you back to your own world." "You can't stay in this world anymore." "What? You can really send us back?" Wu Zhongsha really didn't lie to us. The two Yuan Ku said in surprise when they heard Guhan's words. When Guhan heard this name, Guhan's body trembled violently. Wasn't Wu Zhongsha already dead? According to Guhan's understanding from the brother and sister, Wu Zhongsha had died before the 12th Zhu Wu was unsealed. It was said that he went to Fusang Island to find something, but was ambushed by the Fusang Divine Branch. In the end, only his sword lady came back, while Wu Zhongsha died completely on Fusang Island, without leaving any bones. This matter caused an uproar in the human society at that time. Under the leadership of Lu Shihua, the whole Yangjing city also held a commemoration event for Wu Zhongsha to commend his contribution to mankind. So almost all humans could tell Guhan with certainty that Wu Zhongsha was dead. But now, from the two Yuan Ku's mouths, Guhan actually heard Wu Zhongsha's name again. How could Guhan not be shocked? In the face of Guhan's subsequent interrogation, the two Yuan Kus were quite cooperative. They told him everything they knew, and no matter what Guhan asked, they answered immediately. And to be able to do this, unless the two Yuan Kus had a plan in their minds to deceive Guhan at the same time without revealing any flaws. Then, the two Yuan Kus were telling the truth, and they did not deceive Guhan. And Guhan believed that the result should be the latter. It turned out that these two Yuan Kus were Fuzo's U-level Yuan Kus. One was called Oda Nobunaga, and the other was Inuyasha. Although these two came to this world, they were very nostalgic for their previous world, and were eager to return to their original world to fulfill their dreams that they had not yet achieved. Guhan was not familiar with these two, but from their conversation, He could tell that this Oda Nobunaga seemed to have been burned to death in another world, so he was eager to resurrect and kill those who dared to kill him. As for this Inuyasha, it seemed that he still had an enemy called Nirvana that he had not killed. Anyway, these two Yuan-kus did not want to stay in this world, and were eager to return to their original world. Then, a month ago, they met Wu Zhongsha. According to the two of them, Wu Zhongsha actually built a city on Fuso Island, and there were thousands of Fuso humans living in this city. Because of the filth in their bodies, these two Yuan-kus naturally wanted to kill all these humans. As a result, the two of them were defeated by Wu Zhongsha unarmed, and were even captured alive. These two Yuan-kus originally thought that they were dead, but Wu Zhongsha did not kill them. Instead, he took the initiative to talk to them, and as soon as he opened his mouth, he pointed out the two Yuan-kus' Achilles' heel. He asked them if they wanted to return to their original world alive, and not as corpses. This sentence completely poked the two Yuan-kus' Achilles' heel. Of course, they couldn't wait to tell Wu Zhongsha that they wanted to return to their original world. And Wu Zhongsha asked them to arrive at a specific location one day a month later, and beat up a human swordsman who stayed there. As long as they started fighting, they would definitely be able to return to their original world alive. After that, Wu Zhongsha took the initiative to let these two Yuan-kus go, and did not say anything else. But this sentence was like a kitten's paw, constantly scratching the hearts of these two guys. They felt that Wu Zhongsha seemed to be lying to them, but they also felt that there was no need for him to lie to them. In the end, with the thought that their lives were picked up anyway, and it would be fine if they died, the two actually ran to the vicinity of Yuzhang City. According to the location given by Wu Zhongsha, they actually found a human swordsman who was waiting for something in the same place. This human swordsman was undoubtedly Miss Song-Ifei, so the battle naturally began. But just as the battle entered the most intense stage, Guhan jumped out and scared the two Yuan-kus with just his name, which led to the following scene. This was also the reason why these two Yuan-kus immediately gave up all deception and concealment when they heard that Guhan could send them back to their original world safely, and poured out everything they knew. Because they knew that this was Wu Zhongsha's prophecy coming true, and their dream of returning to their original world could finally be realized. That's right, I believe you are not lying. I will fulfill my promise now. Guhan glanced at his personal terminal, then nodded, went beyond the starting point sword, found the dimensional node on Inuyasha's body, and then slashed down with the starting point sword without hesitation. Under Oda Nobunaga's and Inuyasha's surprised gazes, a dimensional vortex directly appeared above Inuyasha's head, and then sucked the living Inuyasha into it. Finally, he completely disappeared. It's really done. We can really go back now. Seeing Inuyasha disappear in front of him, Oda Nobunaga said with great joy and excitement, as if he had already seen the time when he would leave. But in the next second, Oda Nobunaga's heart was pierced by a sword. At the same time, the demon heart that condensed all of Oda Nobunaga's power was also crushed by Guhan's sword energy in an instant. Why? Why did you kill me alone? Oda Nobunaga looked at Guhan in disbelief, gritting his teeth and asking. Because in my personal terminal, there is no record of Inuyasha killing the swordsman, and there is not much human blood on him, so I let him go. As for you, a total of 12 swordsmen and more than 1,000 people died in your hands, and this does not include those deaths that have not been recorded. Do you think I will let go of a guy like you who has committed heinous crimes against humanity? Guhan sneered. A debt of blood can only be paid with blood. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,